Studios.
Open the podcast doors, Hal.
It's Kubrick's Universe, the Stanley Kubrick Podcast.
Hi, this is the machine. Hello.
How are you, Mr. Fried?
Oh, yeah, I have both names down, Stephen and Jason, and I am fine, thank you.
Good.
And I'm ready to talk with you about my old buddy Stanley Kubrick.
Hey everybody, welcome back, and thanks for joining us in Kubrick's Universe. Today, we have a very special tribute show for you. You know, as time goes by, we lose some of the amazingly talented people who worked with Stanley during his film career, and we recently lost composer and conductor Gerald Fried, February 17th, 2023 to be precise. He was the grand old age of 95. We spoke to Gerald in late 2018 when he was just 90 years young. He was one of the earliest collaborators with Stanley Kubrick, dating back to the very early 1950s. Gerald Fried, a native New Yorker, had scored almost 300 films and TV shows in a career spanning over 70 years. His movie scores include such varied titles as Machine Gun Kelly for Roger Corman, Jack Nicholson's first feature film, The Crybaby Killer, The Killing of Sister George, Too Late the Hero, and The Grisson Gang, all three for director Robert Aldrich. His TV credits include some of the most popular shows being produced at that time, including M Squad, Wagon Train, Gunsmoke, Gilligan's Island, The Man from U.N.C.L.E., Mission Impossible, Lost in Space, Policewoman, and Star Trek. He was nominated for an Oscar for Best Music with an Original Dramatic Score for the feature-length documentary Birds Do It, Bees Do It at the 1976 Academy Awards. He was up against several other notable composers with memorable scores that year, including The Wind and the Lion from Jerry Goldsmith, Jack Nitzsche's One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, Bite the Bullet by Alex North, also an early Kubrick collaborator, and the winner that year was John Williams for probably the most famous movie score of all time, Jaws. So, suffice it to say, Jerry was in great company that night. Gerald Fried also won an Emmy for his work with the legendary producer Quincy Jones on the groundbreaking miniseries Roots from 1977. Having composed the scores for 5 of Stanley Kubrick's earliest films, Gerald is one of Kubrick's most frequent collaborators. Fried and Kubrick first worked together as a composer and director partnership, both at the age of just 23, on the short film Day of the Fight back in 1951, which was followed by 4 feature films, Fear and Desire, Killer's Kiss, The Killing, and Paths of Glory. Now, we released about 30 minutes of this interview back in January 2020, but we now present to you the entire 3-hour interview in honor and respect of the late, great Mr. Gerald Fried.
It's a real honor to have you speaking with us, Gerald. Thanks so much for joining us. How you doing?
Fine, and I congratulate you on getting all the statistics correct.
Thank you.
Off to a decent start and in an auspicious beginning, shall we say?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, so obviously you and Stanley were both born in the Bronx and within a few months of each other. But when did you two first come in contact with each other?
We were brought together by Alexander Singer, who has a good background of winning awards as a director. He was interested in movies, and Stanley, as a Look magazine photographer, became interested in movies, I think primarily because of Alex's passion for movies. And that's also true of me, and perhaps even Do you know the name Paul Mazursky, the director, writer?
Oh, of course.
He was part of that Greenwich Village bunch of bright people, and Alex Mayer brought him into the movie world, or at least got us interested in it. Mm-hmm. Anyway, Stanley asked me to do the music for his first movie, The Short Day of the Fight, as you probably know.
So,
then Stanley and I became friends. Besides, in addition to that, in fact, Stanley actually babysat for my firstborn at one time.
Oh, you got to be kidding me! Tell us about that. Well, just your early years together.
What Stanley was interested in me as a friend. I was a musician compared to those smart Greenwich Village intellectuals. I wasn't very educated, but what I think he liked in me was the fact that I combined a professional career with being sort of what he would call, and what did call, a regular person.
Mm-hmm.
And my credentials in that capacity were dramatized by me having a child at the age of 22. My gosh.
Wow.
An artist, somebody in music who actually is a family man. In addition to that, he found out that I was in a club called the Barracudas in the Bronx, and we had a softball team, and he wanted very much to play a game of softball, like, to use his phrase, like a regular guy.
Mm-hmm.
So I got him a game with the Barracudas. We put him in right field, and he did okay. He made a couple of catches. But I think the point of the story was that for all his brilliance, and it was hard for him to be with regular people who were so much smarter and more sensitive, more introspective than we were. But he wanted to be a regular person, and he felt he accomplished that by playing softball with the Barracudas.
That's great. And you say he played right, huh? He played right field?
Played right field, yeah.
And he made his catches. No errors.
Well, he caught 2 and dropped 1.
Okay.
That's not bad.
No, you know the saying, 2 out of 3. Well, in baseball, that still means he was, shall we say, catching 666, which is a high average.
Yes. One thing, while we were talking about him babysitting, I'd like to add one corollary to that story. Do you remember the movie The Killing, the name of the jockey who was shot, whose horse was shot in The Killing?
Do I remember the character's name or the actor's name?
The character's name.
Ooh, can't remember.
But the character's name was the name of my son, Daniel Fried.
We interrupt this broadcast to bring you a special news bulletin. In one of the most daring and methodically executed hold-ups in criminal history, a lone bandit wearing a rubber mask today took an estimated $2 million stuffed into a large duffel bag from the offices of the Lansdowne racetrack. The robbery occurred during the running of the 7th race and was apparently timed to coincide with a shooting of Red Lightning, just as the horse, valued at $250,000, was leading the pack at the far turn. The jockey, Danny Fried, escaped with minor injuries. A man identified as Nicky Arano, who allegedly shot the prized thoroughbred, was himself fatally wounded by track police as he attempted to shoot his way out of the track parking lot. At this time, the most baffling mystery that still plagues the authorities is just how the bandit managed to successfully get away from the track with a bulky duffel bag containing the money. A painstaking search of the track grounds is being conducted on the theory that the money may still be hidden there. And now we take you back to our regularly scheduled program.
Kubrick, reaching for a name, he thought, just for the heck of it, having met Daniel at the age of 2, he named the jockey Daniel Fried. Just a fun corollary to the story.
That's cool. But that's not unlike stuff that Stanley was doing, using his friends and family, particularly in various roles on the films that he made. And
Ruth Sabatka comes to mind.
Tell us about your memories of them together, if you can.
Yes, they seemed well suited. I knew Stanley's first wife, Toba,
mm-hmm.
and Stanley, for all his discomfort with being regular and wishes to be considered a regular guy, nevertheless managed to marry the prettiest girl in high school, Toba.
Yeah.
That sort of taught us something, that Stanley had something going for him.
Right. He had that charisma.
Apparently, yeah. And we picked it up after a while. But, we're under pressure to be regular people, and Stanley was not regular, even though for very good reason. And his so-called irregularity certainly paid off in a magnificent career. He seemed to be quite suitably married, and she was kind of a star. She was both a dancer and a set and costume designer for, I believe it was City Center when George Balanchine was there. And they seemed perfectly mated, in terms of personality and accomplishment, and physically they were both kind of good looking.
Well, she was, apparently the young sophisticate, and was integral in bringing Stanley to the Greenwich Village scene and introducing him to a lot of the early beat poets and such, and people involved in the art scene at that time, at least according to, what we know from speaking with Vincent Labruto, who wrote, arguably the definitive biography on Stanley. And so we were just curious at what interactions you had, like what your memories were of your time just hanging out with Stanley and Ruth. But it sounds to me like you say they were happy.
Seemed to be quite happy. And when I was in Germany scoring Paths of Glory, I had dinner with both of them just about every night. Stanley, for all his brilliance, was a good friend and kind of a nice guy, to use the Bronx vernacular.
Yeah, a nice guy, exactly. Well,
there was other things too, he was kind of compulsive about his work and control, but then again, that's required of a producer-director. Sure,
of course. Having that singular, vision, so to speak, but also being malleable. I think that comes from, being a Northeasterner, if I may, but I don't want to be presumptuous. And now, I just wanted to touch upon the Bronx and see if James is in on the call, because James Marinaccio, our good friend and researcher, he's born and raised in the Bronx as well. And I know he had a question for you about your time in the neighborhood. Are you there, James?
I'm here, yeah.
Yeah. What neighborhood are you from in the Bronx?
Oh, I moved around, but I grew up first around the Gun Hill Road, Pelham Parkway area.
Yeah, I was up there at Kingsbridge Road.
You were more on the, over near Jerome and on the west side a little bit more, in the Grand Concourse, where...
Yes. Oh, right. You were near Evander Childs High School then.
Oh, my goodness, that's where I went. I went to Evander Childs. That's funny.
Yeah. Did you happen to live in one of those garment workers' big buildings, like what they used to call the Coops or the Amalgamated Building?
No, but a lot of my friends did. I lived in little two-family houses. We moved around like Kubrick. He moved a lot in the Bronx, and then when he went to Manhattan, I put together a little film recently, put it on YouTube, because me and Jason at different times took video of the addresses that we got from the Vincent Labruto biography, and we took some video of the addresses and put it together, and he moved so much.
Yeah. One time he moved 2 doors down.
Yeah.
No, I didn't know him in the Bronx days, even though we're both from the Bronx.
Oh, okay, that's interesting. So you spent more time when he was down in Manhattan?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, he and Toba had a little apartment up on 4th Street or 6th Street or one of the Greenwich Village side streets.
16th or 10th at one time, or 10th at another time?
Yeah, somewhere around there.
Well, you mentioned about, Stanley just wanting to be like a regular guy. And, we know that he was very close with his family. And I'm just wondering if you remember ever meeting Stanley's parents and his sister, Barbara Mary.
Yes.
What are your memories of them?
Stanley's parents my parents and most of the people I knew in the Bronx we were first generation. Our parents were all born in the old country. Mm-hmm. Stanley's parents may have been, I don't even know, but they did not look like that. They were trim and upright and handsome, and his mother was quite attractive. Mm. And that's my impression of them. And he was a doctor, which isn't unusual for first or second generation Eastern Europeans. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. They had kind of a style which my parents and people I knew did not have, and I'm not sure how that affected him, but it obviously did. But I didn't know them well enough to know anything of their dynamics, except they were kind of good-looking and comfortable with the world.
Mm. That's interesting. That's a very unique take on it. Is comfortable with the world. I'm going to remember that. I like that.
Maybe only in comparison to my own parents and the parents of the other people I grew up with.
Yeah, we all have that frame of reference of seeing life initially through the eyes of our own parents. That's well said.
And I remember his sister being not quite comfortable in her own skin.
Oh, interesting. Well, I want to skip ahead because your son Joshua mentioned something about this, and I'm not familiar with this, so I'm just going to phrase the question as best as I have it presented to me. But Stephen was wondering, it has to do something about tennis court reservation proving paranoia. Does this sound okay?
Well,
I'm in the dark here. Help me out, sir.
Okay, yeah, so we played tennis both in Central Park and in the Riverside Drive courts, and there was once we were waiting for a Central Park court, and I'll tie this story with something else that happened on a production meeting of The Killing, but first I'll finish the tennis story. And Stanley saw some people hanging around there. We were in line waiting for a court, and he said, we better move up fast because those two people are over there, they look like they want the court, and I don't want to be in a position where, they come and cut in front of us and get the court, and we can't play tennis, and they have to go home. And I said, Stanley, I didn't know if I understood the word paranoia at that time. We were still in 21, 22 years old. Mm-hmm. But I said, Stanley, please, I can't beat yourself like that. Forget it. Just relax. And exactly what he predicted did happen. They did cut in front of us, and before we could interrupt, they got the court, and Stanley and I went home without playing tennis that day.
Oh, man.
What I want to tie that in with was on the set of The Killing, there was a pre-production meeting. I don't know the circumstances, but a lot of the people who were working on the picture were there. And Stanley looked around, and he said, not prompted by me, I don't know what prompted him, he pointed somebody and said, he is going to fuck up. He's not going to finish the picture. And he looked at somebody else and said, he's going to finish the picture, but he's so self-involved, he's not going to do a good job. And once again, I looked at Stanley and said, come on, man, don't give me this paranoia shit. And like I said, I didn't know the word then. Well, maybe by the age of 22 I did. And of course, that's exactly what happened.
Wow.
A good sense.
And that's perhaps one of the reasons he was such a master movie maker. He anticipated problems. He read characters magnificently.
Yeah. I get that. I get exactly what you're saying there and how you frame it. That's brilliant. Let me ask you, Gerald, just for our listeners' curiosity, I'm wondering why it is that you came to score the first 5 Kubrick films and none thereafter.
Thank you for asking. That's because I think Kubrick produced and directed his pictures like a master chef. He wanted to control all the ingredients. So much so, like in Paths of Glory, I was told he actually auditioned all the machine gun shots in the battlefield, heard each one individually. That's hundreds of sound effects.
Oh, yeah.
It's that important to him, and that's maybe one of the reasons he's Stanley Kubrick, one of the most honored directors of all time.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he couldn't really put the music into the Master Chef mix because you really can't get the feel of the music till you hear the orchestra. And by that time, the recordings, the musicians were so expensive that he was not in a position to redo it if he didn't like it.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was much safer for him to hear pre-recorded music. Also, it was an opportunity to show how clever he is and the marvelous use of that pre-recorded music. The Zarathustra, the Blue Danube.
Mm-hmm.
That was kind of brilliant. But I think in addition to that, he knew it and could deal with it and put it into the ingredients as a master chef. And whereas with the music he hasn't heard yet, he could not do that. And this may be an alibi for me, like maybe two more reasons, neither of which I believe are true, but I like telling this. I was so good, I could not be replaced by a living composer. Or I was so bad that he lost faith in living composers. Like
my gosh.
Either one is true, but I like telling that.
And both are hilarious. Those are really funny, like personal takes that no one else but you has.
Yeah.
Wow.
Also, perhaps one of the reasons that Paths of Glory was primarily an all-percussion score was because Stanley, in his high school orchestra, was a drummer.
Well, we're going to get to that. Of course I do. I'm a lifelong drummer myself, Gerald. And I have to ask you, because as we know, your primary instrument was the oboe and Stanley's was the drums. So right. Did you guys ever play together?
I think we once started fooling around. He had some Latin instruments, so oboe and especially English horn, which, as you know, is a big brother of the oboe, sounds good on Latino music. So I played some things, and he improvised something on a guiro or maracas or one of those Latino instruments. Yeah, we actually did once.
As I understand it, I mean, Stanley was not just like an ordinary timekeeping drummer, that he actually had the feel and he could swing. And I would give anything to be able to hear a recording of Stanley playing drums, even just like a 30 or 60 second soundbite. But so far it's been a dead end.
He played percussion with the high school symphony orchestra.
Mm-hmm.
Traps, timpani, cymbals like that. I do not know anything about Stanley on sit-down drums, but I like the story. So forget about the truth, if you would, and I'll go with your story that I jammed with him. Except for those few Latino instrument things.
Well, that's still a jam. But no, we have seen a photo of Stanley's drum kit, the one that he had in his home at Chittickbury. So we know that at least towards the end of his life. And I'm pretty sure, according to Vincent Labruto's book, that he played in a jazz combo for some time anyway, when he was either, late in high school or in the early years right after high school.
I'm going to revise my story to include myself in that. The truth is I never did jam with him with jazz, but he was, as you know, a chess fanatic, and he played chess when he was living in the village in Washington Square, and there were innumerable percussion groups scattered all around Washington Square. Well, but he played with one of those. And I'd love to lie and say I joined in. In fact, in my next interview, I may have talked myself into lying. But,
no, that's okay.
Am I allowed to interject a story?
Please, do.
Okay. I did some of the Gilligan's Island. In fact, I did it off and on 3 years of Gilligan's Island. One of the sessions was where they had to provide music so Ginger could sing, and they had no instruments there, so they had to make instruments out of shells and pots and pans and empty logs and things like that, and I had to reproduce the sounds myself, for the soundtrack, improvising instruments, old pots and pans and cans, and that was fun and challenging too. So I had my share of playing junk instruments.
That's so cool. Well, it's also there, like you're doing a hybrid of musical scoring and Foley work, so to speak.
Yes, exactly.
How cool. Well, all right, let me toggle back just a bit to, some of your early days in the Bronx. And, we have to assume that none of you guys had a car back then. So how did you, as you Bronxites would say, get into the city? How did you get to downtown Manhattan? Were you primarily taking buses or the subway, like the 4 line, the D?
The D, which was called the IND, just independent, and the IRT.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, and did you know Stanley did a story for Look magazine about a band traveling home late on the subway?
I think so. I have seen. Yeah. Have we seen it?
That was my band. I was in that picture.
Oh my gosh. We have to look that up again.
I remember pictures in the where people are kissing and being passionate or something. I don't remember people playing music. It's probably the same set.
I think he's saying they were just traveling home.
We weren't playing. We were sleeping. He wanted us falling asleep.
Oh, so I think I've seen that, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and you must have taken the 3rd Avenue L, obviously, the elevated train.
Yeah.
And I remember when I was a little kid, I remember the 3rd Avenue L, and it was decommissioned, and they were tearing it down.
Oh, right.
So,
my brother had a girlfriend who lived on the 5th floor across from Yankee Stadium, so we got to watch the games free.
Oh, man, that's great. Like the guys.
She was a very popular girl.
In what way?
It's also pretty, as well as having a free view. Anyway, didn't want to give about my brother's girlfriend, I assume, but...
As we know, Stanley loved to go to the movies at the RKO Fordham and the Loews Paradise Theater.
Right.
And, there are also many long-forgotten one-off theaters in and around that area where you guys lived. Because, of course, multiplexes, as they're now called, or multiple-screen theaters, didn't really come into existence until the late 70s. Do you have memories of going to see movies with Stanley, or any particular movie memories of your own? We
went to a lot of movies, and there were some bad movies. And I sort of asked him, well, why do you want to see these? He says, you could learn even better from bad movies. Mm-hmm. And let's see, in Germany, we went maybe 3 or 4 nights a week to a movie. And in New York, we did a lot too. Yeah. And it was fun with him because his conversations after, he would say, did you see how they used that fence there to blend in with this guy's necktie in a slow dissolve? Things that I never noticed, but Stanley, of course, did. I do recall, I'm paraphrasing, but someone said that Stanley had said that he absorbed all manner of film, good and bad, particularly, as you pointed out, with him learning from bad films. That there was apparently one afternoon he came out of a theater and said, well, if I could get my hands on some equipment, I know I can't possibly make a worse film than what we just saw. Yeah, he did learn. I think that's a great story. It's so telling about him. Yeah. Do you remember roughly how many times you guys would go to the movies during that time? 20, 30 times, lots of movies. Sure. And how much was a ticket then, Gerald? I think they started at something like 25 cents. That sounds reasonable. I'm not sure. But as a poor student, it certainly was within my budget. Mm-hmm. So, in all those early formative years watching movies, and in the early days of your film work, you must have had your ears and eyes trained to an understanding of trying to grasp how music in film worked. So my question is, were there any particular films that you saw in the late 40s and early 50s that really made an impact on you as a composer for film? Oh, for sure. Sergei Prokofiev's score for Alexander Nevsky is the dominant influence in my film scoring life.
Mm-hmm.
Bernard Herrmann was another major. Some of the Malcolm Arnold scores, and among my contemporaries, Elmer Bernstein, who succeeded by 5 years into the movie business. Alex North is another major influence.
Oh, of course, yeah. I'm just wondering if at that time, were you playing in the little orchestra in New York City while all this was going on?
Yes. As a matter of fact, in order to do The Killing, I had to quit the orchestra a week before the Christmas break, and I wrote Tom Sherman, the conductor, saying, Tom, forgive me, I'm violating my contract, and I will pay whatever penalty I'm supposed to pay. But this is an opportunity to write and conduct a score in Hollywood. I may never get this one again, and I'm violating my contract. Forgive me. And like I said, I will do whatever I can legally and morally to compensate for this breach of contract. And of course, he wrote that and says, "Go for it." And there were enough overs around New York City, so I wasn't leaving them in the lurch. But yes, I did The Killing during the season of 55, something like that. 54, 55.
54, I'm thinking. Yeah, wow. That's so cool that it had a happy ending and you were, released from your contract, because otherwise, the world wouldn't have gotten all your great work.
I wasn't going to take a chance of being released from the contract. I just left.
Right.
You asked how did I prepare and what influenced me. I have to tell you the story when Stanley first asked me to do the music for Day of the Fight. I was an oboe major at Juilliard, and I did some jazz arranging, but that's all I did with pencil or pen and paper. So when he said, "Hey, Jerry, you're a musician, I know. Do you know how to conduct and compose and synchronize a movie score?" I said, "Sure, Stanley. All oboe players know how to do that." But he meant it. He actually put money down on the RKO Fifth Avenue studio in New York. He meant it.
Yeah.
So I spent 4 to 5 months doing nothing but going to movies and learning what to do and syncing. I didn't know how to sync a soundtrack. I didn't know about click tracks. So what I did was I took a metronome that had both a click, click, click and a light blinking. I disconnected the click, click and put the light blinker up on the podium. Blinking.
Wow.
And I conducted to half of a blinking metronome. And I got through the score. And
that is extremely clever.
Yeah, Stanley loved it. And I was a review just a few years ago. Somebody say he restored The Killing. Maybe it was one of you guys who said, and there was Gerald Fried's music, pound, 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 pounding me into the wall. Was that one of you fellows who wrote that?
It was not me, sir. Although I would be honored to make such an apt description.
Yeah, I was flattered by it, but he meant it as an insult.
No, I wouldn't have taken it as an insult at all. I mean, that's the power of music, right? That's the effectiveness, pounding you into the wall like that. And again, I got to say, I think that's extremely clever and resourceful of you to do something like that. That is improvisation in its own right. I mean, on a technical level, here you are as a musician, you've committed to this and you're teaching yourself how to work along to a click track, and you create this method by using a light bulb in synchronicity with that. That's something that I'm guessing Stanley would have seen as very much in line with his own gumption when it came to, okay, how can I figure this out? How do I make this work?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I have to tell you a story. When I was speaking with Stanley about the music for Day of the Fight, And I said to him, well, Stanley, in this scene, what would you like the movie to do? And he said, the same thing I always ask from you. And he imitated a drum beat, which is his way of telling me, driving music as much as possible.
I get that.
So from his sort of encouraging, that's when I thought of that the main theme of the music for The Killing, which is the dogfight between 2 and 3. Both of the orchestras playing bum 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 bum, and the brass are going bum 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 bum. So that dogfight between 2 and 3 was the essence of the music, which is the most tense music I could think of. And Stanley liked it. I got 4 more pictures with him from that.
Yeah, you did. Well, I mean, that brings to mind the word propulsion, that propulsiveness that is so clear in your scores that really I think is essential to Stanley's films in terms of the narrative. It really does. Your scores really do help drive the story forward with that brilliantly syncopated rhythmic drive, for want of a better phrase.
Well, that's the theory. That's what we get paid to do.
Wow. So did you come from a musical family, Gerald?
Yes. My grandfather in the old country was court musician. What's his name? Zord Chernovsky, I think his name was, one of the biggest landowners in the Ukraine. And he hired my grandfather to be the court musician, teach the other serfs how to play, and just provide music for him. Yes, one of his daughters was my piano teacher, and she moved to Montreal and played piano for silent movies.
No kidding.
Yeah.
So when did you first take piano lessons from her?
At the age of 8.
8.
And I hated it.
Yes, so did I. Now I love it. Right. Did you decide to become a musician, before sitting down at the keys, or when was your come to music moment?
My come against music moment started when they made me take piano lessons, and I didn't like anybody to make me do anything.
Yeah.
And became probably the world's worst piano student in the Bronx, just out of spite. But the punchline to the story is, at the age of 12, one of my brother's friends was a saxophone player. He didn't want to play anymore, so he sold me the saxophone. Within 6 months, I was working, and at the age of 14, I was already making enough money to give myself a sense of independence.
Wow.
Which is a good demonstration of motivation in pedagogy. I'm still a lousy pianist, even though I use the piano, of course, as the instrument of reference. But give me something I wanted to do to play jazz saxophone, and like I said, at the age of 14, I was a working stiff.
That's amazing.
I went to music and art high school, and I came in on piano, and they give you an orchestral instrument, and they gave me the oboe, for which I am eternally grateful. I love the instrument, and I still play in the Norwalk Symphony and in the Connecticut Symphonic Winds here.
Oh, I have to come up and see you.
Okay.
I'm not even half joking. I got to make a point of doing that.
All right. Hey,
all right.
I'm enjoying this.
I hope so. It's a real treat to get to chat with you.
Do you know the name Howard Sackler?
Yes.
He was part of those super bright guys that Kubrick hung around with.
Mm-hmm. I know him from the Labruto book and from speaking with Vincent Labruto, but go on.
Yes, he was also, his character was in a movie made by Paul Mazursky. I think the movie was Next Stop, Greenwich Village.
Okay.
Paul was also part of that group. He was still called Irwin then.
I did not know that. Paul Mazursky was originally Irwin?
Yes, he was.
How about that? James, you got something?
No, I was just saying he was in Fear and Desire.
Oh, of course.
Right.
And he later became a pretty prominent director in his own right.
Oh, I love his movies, yeah.
Yeah, no question. Well, okay, speaking of movies, I want to leapfrog into the part two with a discussion of your years collaborating with Stanley, beginning with 1951's The Day of the Fight. Now, Day of the Fight is, of course, the very first film that Kubrick directed in 1951. It's a short documentary which followed the New York middleweight boxer Walter Cartier through his preparations for his fight with Bobby James that took place on April 17th in 1950.
This is the story of a fight and of a fighter, Walter Cartier. Today is the fight. Tonight at 10 o'clock will be one of the moments which justify his difficult life. At 6 o'clock on the morning of the fight begins the toughest part of being a boxer, the waiting. Walter is on the right of Vincent, his identical twin. He doesn't mind the hard training, the 4 miles of road work every day, as much as the waiting. Walter knows that each bout is more important than the one before because he's rapidly climbing to the middleweight championship of the world, and he must keep winning. It's a long way until night. Walter, wearing the bow tie, is 24. He's a native of New York and a fighter as far back as he can remember. His father is away, and when he was a little boy, he lost his mother. Walter began to do exhibition boxing with his brother Vincent when they were 3 years old. During the war, they fought exhibitions in the Navy, where they were in the same outfit together.
Now, the score to Day of the Fight is very driving and intense. And it definitely feels very much, it plays out like a noir thriller in its approach, which only lets up in those final few moments during the fight itself. So can you tell us, Gerald, about the discussions you had with Stanley prior to getting started on those compositions?
Yeah, well, that's when I described that his instructions to me for those scenes in the middle and the end of the movie were bum, 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 bum. That's his way of me saying it, make it driving and percussive. Mm-hmm. So he kind of encouraged me to write that kind of music. I probably would have written something like that on my own. I'm kind of drum happy myself.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of the basically true primitive sounds in all of music.
It's probably the first form of mass communication, is it not?
Probably, yeah.
I heard that from a professor in college that, it was likely that one tribe would use drums to send messages to another, either, a warning that a war party was coming or something like that. And my professor framed it as though drums were arguably the first form of mass communication that humans ever devised.
Yeah. I go even further than that. I was once asked, what are the dominant inputs to music? And the person who asked me that was an anthropologist, and he assumed my answer would be, well, the cultural inputs. Chinese music is so much different from Russian, from American, from jazz, etc. Mm-hmm. And I said, to me, the two primary musical wells that music draws its water and its power from are the body rhythms, meaning the heartbeat and walking, the percussion instruments, and something called the chord of nature, which is, that can be demonstrated. You go to a piano, hold down the pedal so that the strings vibrate, play a low note, and if you listen carefully, you will hear the overtones of what's called the chord of nature.
Yes.
The first interval is an octave, boom, boom. Next interval is a fifth, boom, pop, fifth. And then they get all of the third, etc., etc. You probably know this anyway. That, to me, are the two main wellsprings of music, body rhythms and the chord of nature. And when all else fails, I go back to them. And percussion is based, of course, on body rhythms.
Yes.
Fast, slow, heartbeat, breathing, etc. So that helped me formulate my music for Day of the Fight. And then, after that, I went back to Juilliard and became a composing student to find out what I just did.
That's great. I mean, yes, all of that made sense. But for our listeners, thank you so much for elaborating on that. I'm just going to follow up by asking, was there a reason you didn't score for the fight scene itself in Day of the Fight?
I'm sure there was. Let me see if I could think of what it was. I think the sound effects were so effective. No, I'm sorry, I can't recall a conversation with Kubrick.
That's cool. That's okay. I mean, sometimes the absence of music is a choice that directors make, for its own sense of propulsion, the sound of the action on the screen.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
The build-up to the fight, I had all that tense, dramatic 3 against 2 music. So therefore, when that stopped, that silence made a statement. Like, this is the fight, focus on it kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
I bet that was part of our thinking.
So when Stanley asked you to create the score for Day of the Fight, were you in Juilliard at that time? And if so, were there other students who were discussing how it would be possible to score for films?
There must have been. There were, composing majors there.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, John Williams was at Juilliard a few years after that.
Yeah.
We didn't know each other then. We didn't overlap. We missed by 1 year.
Okay.
There must have been. But I was interested in jazz saxophone and symphony oboe, and none of this movie music stuff. So Stanley's asking me was the most luckiest thing that ever happened to me. It, got me on this career.
Mm.
He lived in an apartment, and the church used in that short was right across the street.
Yes, it was.
And I remember taking the photograph of the apartment, and I wasn't aware of that, and I turned around, and I said, oh my goodness, that's the church.
Now, through the quiet morning streets of New York, the two boys walked to morning mass. It's important for Walter to get Holy Communion in case something should go wrong tonight.
And it's probably, I don't know if you're aware, but I suspect maybe the same serendipity happened with him, and he just used it because it was across the street from where he lived.
That's a pretty good reason right there. To go past that reason. It's just available and did the job that he wanted it to do.
Well, that's nothing if to not show how resourceful he was, as we already know. I mean, he was always very wisely culling his resources from whichever angle seemed to make the most sense. And I can attest to what James is saying. I mean, the church is like, it's not on an opposite corner, but it's catty corner, so to speak. It's just diagonally across the street from that apartment he was living in, and maybe 40 yards away. Would you say, James? 50 yards away? It's like nothing. It's right there. And he must have just looked out his window and said, oh, I need a location there,
Yeah. Speaking of that apartment, I forgot the name of his dog, but I knew Stanley had a dog he loved very dearly. Do you know the name of that dog?
Gosh, I don't.
Oh, wow, no.
We certainly know he was an animal lover.
Yeah.
Right, because we all know about when he moved to England, to the English countryside, and he had the homes, the estates with all the land around it, that he had many dogs and cats, and there are some photographs of it. But I didn't even think of that if he had pets in New York. So that's really cool to hear.
He had one dog, a small dog, with an ordinary name like Spot or something like that.
Rover.
Showered, in that category. And he showered a lot of affection on that little fellow.
Oh, that makes sense. I mean, what pictures we do have of him with dogs and cats, as animal people ourselves, it's clear that, you're looking at someone who, for whom it was effortless to just dote affection upon those animals. It came very naturally to him, and it was something he wanted to to do. It was just inherent in his personality, and I think that speaks volumes of any man who, has that kind of compassion for the little creatures in the world, so to speak.
Gerald, do you remember what the dog looked like?
I remember black and white, small.
Is it the one that was in Day of the Fight? Because the two brothers, the twins, they didn't have a dog in real life, but I believe that Stanley provided them a dog, dog, just to show a bit of compassion with the boxer. So I wonder if that was his dog that he used in the film then, because he did supply it.
I think so. Yeah, I think so. Huh.
I bet you're onto something there, Stephen.
At Walter's 3-room apartment where he lives with his aunt, Vince is serving him breakfast. He's a lawyer and Walter's manager. Vince lives in New Jersey, but in the slow hours before the fight, he's staying with his brother. Now they live as they used to years ago, the two boys and Walter's dog.
Well, so there's an obvious Bernard Herrmann influence in that score, and I say that as all praise. It's a compliment, as I know you already mentioned he was a big influence on you, and as I understand it, you recorded the score in New York with 19 musicians, and Stanley attended this session. Do you recall how long that recording session was? And
I think it was about 3 hours and about 2 hours overtime, so 4.5, 5 hours.
Okay, wow. That's pretty efficient.
Speaking of composers, ask me who played first French horn on that recording of the Day of the Fight.
Gerald, who played first French horn on the recording of Day of the Fight?
The head of music at the New England Conservatory, Gunther Schuller.
Okay, wow.
Have you ever run into Gunther?
I've not met Mr. No, I have not met Gunther. But
you do ask him about that recording. I think it was his first professional recording. We were kids in our early 20s.
How about that?
Oh, well, there's another story about that. I invited, the people I knew, I hired them to be in the episode, mostly people my age, early 20s. Mm-hmm. We got to the studio on RCA on 5th Avenue, and the manager of the studio wouldn't let us in. He says, "You kids can't come in here. There's a professional recording coming in." Wouldn't let us in. It took Stanley to get there, and showed that I'm the guy who wrote the check. Let them in.
Yeah. Wow.
That's one of my favorite stories.
That is a very cool story. I could just see him having the moxie to show up there and say, "No, I'm the guy whose name is on the check, and you're going to let them in."
Yeah, yeah. No, he was a good producer and a good director. He wasn't unpleasant about it, but he knew what he wanted, and he sort of got it done. And it drove a lot of people crazy. He was so fussy, but he's Stanley Kubrick.
Right. And, in more recent years, there's been some chatter, and without trying to give any, weight or too much credence to it, but, some have said that Stanley did take a long time to pay his musicians for that session, and it's possible that you weren't paid, but is it okay to give him the benefit of the doubt and say that you guys were really just young guys scraping by in those days and doing what you could to get your foot in the door? Or do you have another recollection about that? I
have only one recollection, and our deal was that we would work for nothing, but as soon as he sells the picture, we'll get paid. Mm-hmm. He paid the musicians. That was never an issue, but he wouldn't pay me. So I said, he sold the picture. I says, "Well, no, I'm supposed to get paid now." Says, "Jerry, if it wasn't for me, you wouldn't be in the picture business." Mm-hmm. I already done Fear and Desire, and my name was around. I also probably have. I got an agent. I was with the MCA music department. I was established because of Stanley. He says, "Jerry, I did enough for you. I don't have to pay you." I said, "Stanley, Part of the reason that that picture did well and that you're in the business was because of the quality of my music.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And but then again, we spent a lot of time today talking about that Kubrick was a good friend and a nice guy.
I was going to say, it doesn't sound like you were jilted. That you certainly don't sound jilted by the experience of working with and being his friend.
Ultimately, no. It just, it was a matter of professional pride, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the reason your movie got you into the business was partly because of my music, which may or may not be true. But in any case, I had to defend my ego. But it's irrelevant now. He got me into the business, and I was very happy being a film composer.
If it's okay, I want to ask about Alexander Singer, who you mentioned before. And Alexander operated the second camera at the boxing match itself.
Right.
And he's the one who you mentioned introduced you to Stanley back in the 1940s. Or did he reintroduce you? Because we have conflicting stories. They were both at Taft High School, and you were at Juilliard. Did the three of you socialize together?
In my high school days, I did socialize with Alex, who lived around the corner from me. I did not know Stanley in high school. I went to Music and Art High School.
Right.
Taft. And it is true, Alex did get Stanley interested in movies. Alex was a still photographer, too, and Stanley, as you know, at the age of 16, it was cheaper for Look magazine to put him on salary as to pay him per job. He was that good.
So Alexander Singer's film Cold Wind in August from 1961 was also scored by you. So we're curious, did you remain friends with Alex in later life?
Still are.
That's great.
He's not in good health now.
Yeah.
But he's in Los Angeles and I'm in Connecticut. But I talk to his son Jethro a lot. And just a few months ago, I actually talked to Alex before he got seriously ill.
Okay.
Did you used to live in New Mexico?
I lived in New Mexico for 17 years.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I remember a newspaper article a few years ago.
Yeah, and commuted to L.A. to still do scores. And I did a few movies in Santa Fe, too.
Oh, wow. That's a beautiful city.
For the last 15 years, I've been writing plays and movie screenplays. One of them, which won a competition in New York, and they're about kind of mystical occurrences, people with powerful fantasies who are taken over by their fantasies. That seems to be the subject matter that got my attention, and that's what I'm writing about.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
Including two in the world of music. Anyway, that's off the subject.
No, that's still really interesting.
Yeah. Well, I'll say one is in the jazz world, one is in the classical symphony world. Anyway, when we have more time, if you're interested, I'll tell you about them.
No, absolutely. But since we want to let you go in about 5 minutes, I just want to ask about the upcoming auction at Bonhams for this recently unearthed screenplay for Burning Secret, quote-unquote discovered by our friend Professor Nathan Abrams. And we'd like to ask you about the upcoming Bonhams auction that you have entered some lots into, including the 1956 Kubrick and Willingham penned script for The Burning Secret. This was a film, for our listeners, that Stanley and his producing partner at the time, James B. Harris, had tried to get made, but failed to garner studio interest. How did you come into possession of it, Gerald, and where has it been for the last 60 years?
Oh, in one of my closets, and I gave it to my son Joshua, who's a Kubrick fan, and he set up the auction, and plus letters I have from Kubrick.
Oh, wow.
He asked me to do the music for it. I said, sure. I was well read enough to have respect for Stefan Zweig, And Kubrick, this was before I knew that Kubrick was going to, would not use live scores anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Or I'm not sure of the time sequence, but anyway, I expected to do it. He asked me and gave me a script. That's how I got to be in possession of the script.
Wow. So did you always know you were in possession of this, or was it, as you say, just in a box in your closet, and one day you were like, oh, here's Burning Secret?
Yeah, it was on a shelf until I realized that Kubrick now, people are collecting his memorabilia. He's, a major person in our lives and history. So
yes.
I gave to my son Joshua, who's a Kubrick fan, and plus the letters, plus, of course, all the recordings, which I think my children have anyway, and he took it from there.
We broke off the first interview there and called Gerald back a few days later to continue the discussion. Here is our continuation.
Hello?
Hello?
Yeah, I'm here.
Hi, Gerald.
Oh, hello, hello, hello.
Thank you for singing my song.
How you doing?
Okay. I was fascinated by your questions, and you know about the auction coming up, of course.
Yeah. Do you want to say anything? We asked you a bit about it last time. Do you have anything you want to add? Feel free.
Not really. I was planning to go, but I have a rehearsal the day before and a concert the day after. And if I'm going to go through the trouble of traveling to New York and all that, I need more time there to see family and friends.
Sure.
So I decided not to go.
Okay. Well, I guess they'll have to soldier on without you.
Yeah, I can't imagine that would be too difficult for them.
Well, best of luck with that. It looks like an exciting auction.
Indeed. So we've got Stephen and James on the call again with Gerald, and I'm glad you like those questions. Those were all from Stephen, James, and our friend Mark, who also helps with the research quite a bit. So I'm just going to pick up where we left off, if that's okay. And
that's what I'm here for.
All right. You're the man. You're the man. Let's see. All right. Well, I believe where we left off, we were talking about Fear and Desire from 1953.
There is war in this forest, not a war that has been fought, or one that will be, but any war. And the enemies who struggle here do not exist unless we call them into being. This forest, then, and all that happens now, is outside history. Only the unchanging shapes of fear and doubt and death are from our world. These soldiers that you see keep our language and our time, but have no other country but the mind.
And this was the second film that you scored for him in his first feature film, Fear and Desire. I believe that was not only Stanley's first, but yours as well.
Absolutely.
That must have been a very exciting proposition. Can you tell us about roughly when did Stanley ask you to work on Fear and Desire?
I'm not sure of the exact timetable, but it was an appropriate amount of time. We sort of became friends just before Day of the Fight and remained friends during that and after. So he probably mentioned it early in the game, and then when the time came around to book a studio and get serious, he did so. So if I had to give an answer, let's say 2 or 3 months before the scoring session or something like that.
Right.
We kind of assumed that I would do it at that time.
Okay. So, again, you conducted the orchestra in the studio to record your score for Fear and Desire. Was Stanley present at that recording?
Oh, absolutely. He was present at all of them, sure.
Do you recall roughly how long it took for you to record it? The takes?
Fear and Desire, we had a 3-hour session. We went about an hour and a half or 2 hours overtime.
Wow.
So let's say overall it took 5 hours.
Incredible. To get so much work done in that amount of time.
Yeah, well, the musicians, were good musicians, and I tried to anticipate all the problems, and I guess I did enough so that it went fairly smoothly.
Do you have any other thoughts about Fear and Desire? What did you think of the picture when you saw it?
I loved it. I thought it was a good dramatic story and an important philosophical statement about the point of view of the soldiers and how they wanted a moment of glory, and the only thing they could think of was to kill a general. Now that sounded a little soporific, or maybe a little like the present political scene in the United States at the time now. But I understand. A lot of people, especially people in the arts, have this need or wish or desire or fantasy to do something, quote, important, something cosmic. And these soldiers could think of nothing else but to kill a general. And I related to that, and I think Stanley understood that too. Of course he did. He was in charge of the movie. So, yes, I liked the movie very much. And
that's a really interesting take on it, a very unique angle, if I may say so.
Oh, okay.
Well, I also want to ask because, the film was not available. It wasn't in distribution. It was only unearthed a number of years ago. Do you recall how much time passed between when you first saw it and were you able to see it again in more recent years?
Well, I guess you don't have this information, but it had a showing in Manhattan at an art house a few months after we finished the picture, and I got some very good write-ups. Do you know the name Sigmund Spaeth, the columnist? Yeah,
I believe he's mentioned in Vincent Labruto's book.
Oh, okay. Well, he gave me a very good write-up for the score. He said the score had superior vibrations.
Superior vibrations. Now, forgive me if I sounded like I wasn't. I was aware of the art house showing because in Labruto's book it mentions that the film did, garner generally positive reviews from critics, even if the public wasn't aware of it. But Fear and Desire wasn't available, I meant to say, on like home video, on DVD or anything, or VHS prior to that for many years. And I don't recall which year it was released by Kino Lorber. But we just wondered if you'd seen it again more recently.
Actually, I saw excerpts of it from some rerun or some, I'm not sure the circumstances, but as I recall, it was Stanley himself who withdrew the picture from public scrutiny.
Yeah. All right, so moving on to Killer's Kiss from 1955.
And out of the city's jungle night comes the clawing, burning impact of a killer's kiss. It hits with the gut shock of a knockout punch. A picture as brazen as the naked bulbs of Broadway, and as hard as the New York streets where it was shot.
Can't you get it, Vinny? To me, you're just an old man. You smell bad.
I could kill you right here and now.
Oh, I don't think you will.
I wouldn't be too sure of that.
Don't kill me. I don't want to die. I'll do anything you say. Anything.
He was lost as soon as he looked at her.
I love you.
Caught in a double cross, as dirty as the alley where they planned to end it.
I'm gonna count to 3, and if you still don't know, I'm gonna blow your brains out. 1, 2.
She's in a loft on 24th Street.
How'd she get there?
Boys are waiting in her apartment.
Is she all right?
All rules are off. All fouls are fair. As man meets murder in the stabbing, slashing climax that's the payoff for a killer's kiss.
This was, of course, your third collaboration with Stanley, and also his second, somewhat more polished features film. Can you tell us about your approach to the music for Killer's Kiss and what was discussed between you and Stanley? Did he give you a lot of notes, or did he say, watch the film and bring me a score?
Well, there was a preamble. He was so upset by the reviews of Fear and Desire, the sophomoric attempt to be an artsy, Sergei Eisenstein kind of American and write a profound movie, which was a total failure cinematically. He was so stung by those reviews that Killer's Kiss was made to show his commercial chops, and I'm using that phrase as a quote from Stanley. Commercial chops.
Right.
A serious attempt to be non-artsy and to make a regular kind of movie with a hero, a villain, a love story, and that was the genesis of Killer's Kiss. And he even did that well, I thought, and I even thought that was quite an artful movie too, like that famous fight in the Mannequin Factory was kind of a splendid piece of cinematography. But his desire was to show that he does have commercial chops. I don't think at that point he cared about the critics. He wanted to have the picture make money so he'd get financing for his next project.
Sure.
Right.
I wondered if you recall, like, did Stanley give you notes about what he was hoping for?
Well, there were no written notes, but we talked about it a lot. And I think one of the reasons he used that song was because it was written by a songwriter who already was getting popular, Norman Gimbel, and he wanted to show that he could play the game, and have a hit song from the movie. I wasn't going to argue. I would have liked to have written my own, but I was so pleased to be able to do another feature that I kept my mouth shut. And it was a pretty good song, as I remember.
It's called Once, if I'm not mistaken.
Once, yes.
Doing all right for yourself.
What do you mean? Oh, he just lives in the building.
Oh. Used to be a pretty good fighter.
A fighter?
Sure. He's fighting tonight, as a matter of fact. We can watch him on the TV.
Well, it certainly works perfectly as a love theme, and it would have been interesting nonetheless to hear what... I'm sure you would have given something fantastic as well.
Well, I have to assume that.
I think it's safe to assume. So, but you also used some really cool Latin jazz and mambo rhythms on the Killer's Kiss soundtrack, which have always stuck out to me, and I'm sure a lot of fans of the film.
Okay, let's go.
Do you recall the genesis of that idea, how it developed?
You asked that question in your notes, and I'm so happy you asked. Yes, I do know the genesis of that. I was making my living, playing odd jobs around New York on saxophone, and I would play with Latino bands, and I would play regular dance bands. And I found out that late at night, after 12 or 1 o'clock, I was getting tired. We were playing American standards, even, the great stuff, the Cole Porter, Hoagie Carmichael kind of things.
Mm-hmm.
We get a little sleepy. But playing the Latino music, which was obligatory then, the Latin revolution in music had come to New York, I never got tired of playing Latino music. Mm. And I think because it was like folk music, which, is evergreen.
Yes.
And I never got tired of that. Even late at night, it was kind of refreshing. It kind of struck some kind of a root. I never forgot that. In fact, you mentioned in one of your questions that I'm writing screenplays now, and one of them has as its star a Puerto Rican street musician. So I'm once again writing Latin or Latino music.
Oh, that's cool.
Which is correct, Latin music or Latino? Latino refers to a person, right? So it's Latin music?
Yeah,
gosh,
music. Yeah.
I believe, that is correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, that's great that you're still, taken by that genre, that you're still working with it. I've always responded to it. I think, Latin rhythms are, for me, they were a huge influence and continue to be so. And they're used to great effect, obviously, in the Killer's Kiss soundtrack. So when you were recording those sessions, do you have any recollections of specifically your time recording the Latin rhythm combo?
Yeah, we brought in Alexei, I forgot his name, one of these famous percussionists of the time, to help us with those, yeah. And Killer's Kiss, I think, was done in New York as well. And I knew some Latino musicians, people like Shelly Mann and Larry Bunker and Ray Brown and Red Mitchell. They were so good and so versatile that they fitted right into the Latino stuff.
Yeah.
And on piano, I think Cy Coleman did some of those recordings for me. Do you know him, the composer of Sweet Charity? The famous.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he was then Seymour Kaufman when he was playing piano for me.
Okay, the name is familiar. Go on, sorry.
The name became Psycho. Anyway, that's fun. It was always the dessert of a recording session. The symphony musicians went home, and then the jazz guys do the small combo stuff, which is always fun.
Yeah.
And I played on some of them myself.
You did? Do you recall which instruments you played?
Yeah, tenor sax on some of the jazz stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like on Crybaby Killers, specifically, that was a movie that I think Andre Previn was the pianist on. Mm. And I trotted out my tenor sax, and I held my own with these great jazz musicians.
Cry, baby, baby, cry, cry, cry. I pushed him too fast against the hard, cold wall. No one to hear, no one to call.
All-out exposure of the jazz beat generation. Living like crazy. Loving like mad.
Well, Carol was a swell girl until Manny got his hands on her.
You mean till she wanted Manny's hands on her?
The story of pent-up, twisted kids whose violence screams at you from the headlines every day. Their blazing destruction rains viciousness upon the land.
You'll wind up in the gutter before you're old enough to vote.
Here's what happens when the cops stage a blast out. When hysterical crowds gather screaming for blood. When a boy gets a gun and unleashes a monstrous terror as the Crybaby Killer.
But you're a mad beast, an animal.
An accident.
What's the matter with you? You afraid of hurting his feelings, this monster with a gun? Murderer, degenerate?
Shut up. I'm giving you 10 minutes, son. Then we're coming in.
Oh, let me try! Let me talk to him. Let me
Back
talk to
inside.
him.
Officer, take her back inside where she belongs.
That was fun, and also it saved me a salary. I was, on a tight budget. Didn't have to pay myself.
That's cool. James has a question, but I want to bring him in for it. Or actually, I think he just wanted to point out a cool piece of trivia. But I have a long shot question. We have to ask: did Stanley, by any chance, play drums on any of these tracks?
No, he did not consider himself a professional drummer, even though he was, played in the high school band or high school orchestra. No, he didn't. But
okay.
And we both were kind of drum happy, which accounted partly for our good relationship. There's something so primal about percussion that appealed to both of us.
Yes. Yeah. Couldn't agree more. And I want to ask about The Killing, of course, from '56, which was your next collaboration with him.
Give or take a few thousand. I figure the loot on this deal at $2 million. There should be that much in the track offices. Like money. You got a great big dollar sign there where most women have a heart. So play it smart. Stay in character and you'll have money. Plenty of it. George will have it. He'll blow it all on you.
Johnny, I'm no good for anybody else. I'm not pretty and I'm not very smart, so please don't leave me alone anymore.
So what makes you think or know that you're going to have several $100,000?
Because I do. I just can't talk about it, that's all.
Not even to me, your little share.
I shouldn't have even mentioned I was going to have it. It's not that I mind. I know I can trust you. But if these other guys
The other guys?
I can't talk about it, Cherry.
You've been talking. Now you spilled to her.
I didn't, honest. What, do you think I'm crazy? I wouldn't
Jerk, you clown. Come on, clown. Sing us a chorus from Pagliacci.
Hey, where's the jerk? Where's George?
Like Killer's Kiss, which was a film told as a series of flashbacks from the protagonist's point of view, The Killing also plays around with time and uses a disjointed, nonlinear narrative. So do you need to employ a different aesthetic when composing music for films that shift time like that? Or do you need to help the clarity of the story musically in another way?
I think I did a little of both. As I remember, there was some, when the flashback went back a few years, I think I actually altered the style of the music. But the overriding thing, especially in The Killing, was, Stanley's insistence that drive and energy took precedence over everything. I think I told the story how he described how he wanted the music, what the aesthetic of the music should be, by doing a
Yep,
and
I remember.
That overrode everything. And the score, I try to reflect that, including the flashbacks. Like I would start when there was another flashback, I would go back and develop a theme as the time developed. I think there was some coordination of time and music, but it wasn't that specific. It wasn't like I didn't go back to make the music a period piece. I don't think the time span was that great.
Mm. Well, it sounds like you certainly knew how to adapt to the different approaches that he was employing, again, to tell a nonlinear story. And that can, be very challenging to do with music. But
well, by that time, I was an old, experienced pro of 26.
Right.
I can tell you, those early movies, I learned a lot. Just the dynamics, the technology, as well as the aesthetics of what music can do. And maybe Stanley's presence, he communicated kind of a specialness. Like he made you reach for the best parts of yourself just by his intensity and his interest and his own aesthetic preoccupations.
Sure. One can be a veteran at 26. If I'm not mistaken, I think Paul McCartney and George Harrison, being the younger of the two Beatles, they were both 26 when they recorded the White Album in 1968. They were right around there. And that just had its 50th anniversary, that album's release. And if you listen to the musicianship on that level, that was the band really at a new creative peak. And they were, seasoned veterans of the ripe old age at 26.
Right.
So when you recorded the score for The Killing, you did so in L.A. rather than in New York. And
yes.
If I'm not mistaken, this orchestra was almost double the size that you had worked with before. Were you composing the score with over 40 musicians in mind?
Well, I knew it was going to be. There was an orchestral minimum. If a movie was over a certain amount of time and over a certain budget, the union requirement was that you must use a 40-piece orchestra.
I see. Interesting.
Yeah, and it was wonderful, because you could say to the director, well, I'm not wasting your money, but it's mandatory. We can't get, et cetera, et cetera. I loved it.
Sure. Understandably. So I presume then that there was money in the budget to cover that amount of musicians already.
Well, I was going to say, no, of course not. Stanley and I had a run to the Cayman Islands for 10 years. Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah, well, he had a rich uncle, Martin Purveller, I think, who financed that movie. Or did he finance Fear and Desire? I forgot which.
I believe it was Fear and Desire, but go on.
By that time, Kubrick had some leverage in the business, so he probably didn't have that much trouble. And, of course, after The Killing, he one of the great film noir films of all time, he had no financial troubles, as I remember.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned Andre Previn before. Did you say that he played piano on The Killing?
I know, remember on Cry Baby Killer, that movie, and yes, he played on The Killing too, yes.
Wow.
I remember that 5/4 section where the orchestra played a figure in 5/4, and Andre imitated that on piano a bar and a half later. Yeah, Andre was the pianist on The Killing. It's fun dropping the names of the musicians who were on some of those sessions. Like I grew up, with some jazz heroes, people like Pete Candoli and Red Callender and Ray Brown. Mm-hmm. And sure enough, they were in the orchestra I was conducting. It was a mind blower.
Wow. Ray Brown is a legend.
Yeah. And Andre Previn isn't a slacker.
No slouch there either, sir. No, by any stretch. So now, by the time you were scoring The Killing, you say, I'm paraphrasing you, you had developed your own kind of trademark style. For example, the Battle of 3 versus 4. Where do you recall where you got that idea from?
I certainly can. Igor Stravinsky, for one thing.
Mm-hmm.
He used that as a source of tension in a lot of his music. I also learned another device from Igor Stravinsky. You're a musician, you might appreciate this story. It's hard to equal the power of a plain old classical major and minor triad. You know, it's like the chord of nature. It has power, beauty, stamina, etc., etc. But you can't write with major and minor chords simply. You just sound like bad Mozart. So what I learned from Stravinsky, and I used in certainly in that thing I wrote for Star Trek, that Amok Time, but I think I started using that with The Killing, to take those triads, but instead of having just plain triads, I'd have, let's say, a G major triad, say, in the treble in the right hand, and a G sharp major triad in the left hand, the two of them going at once on a rhythmic figure.
How cool.
The power of triads, and you get the 20th century fire and dissonance of the half tones. So you as a musician know exactly what I'm talking about.
I do, sir, yeah.
And
precisely.
I think I started that in The Killing on some of those sections.
Well, the use of dissonance in those sections is really powerful, and as we discussed earlier, to use the phrase, very propulsive, the way it helps drive the imagery and the music forward together. There's a real synergy there.
Yeah, I think Kubrick referred to that as the dogfight between the three against the four, or against the two.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was his phrase, dogfight.
Well, now you and Stanley both being, very artistically minded individuals, you had to continually come up with new ideas, both as individuals and together. Do you recall how you and he and how you both went about deciding which were good and which were bad ideas? Or shall we say not usable ideas?
Well, yes, I could first describe the first two pictures, certainly Day of the Fight and Fear and Desire and Killer's Kiss. He wasn't that comfortable with music or the power of music, or had the knowledge and the experience to have much of an opinion. So he trusted me pretty much. He just told me what he wanted the music to do, as I described, and I used my own experience and my double background, both playing with jazz and swing groups and playing in symphony orchestras. I was that time with the Pittsburgh Symphony and the Dallas Symphony. And when I did Paths of Glory, I was with the Los Angeles Philharmonic. So I had that double background, and he trusted me. It wasn't until we got mostly to Paths of Glory when he realized that he can't let anything out of his control because he might get hurt. And I think I told you that he heard every single machine. You know how many machine gun sound effects there were in the Paths of Glory?
Yeah.
He auditioned every one of them.
He went through all of them.
Justify every note in Paths of Glory. And I remember one in general. There was the patrol was out in no man's land, and they come across the bodies of their fellow dead soldiers. And I was going to use a cymbal crash there, and I remember spending a whole afternoon talking Stanley into letting me use that cymbal crash. He felt it was too obvious, a Hollywood cymbal crash, or I'm not sure what he was thinking of, but I told him that a cymbal crash could be a very subtle sound effect. That was about a 3 or 4 hour session on one cymbal crash. That was the Stanley Kubrick that the world has grown to know and love.
Right.
And not everybody loved it, but that's what made him Stanley Kubrick.
That focus and meticulousness, the attention to detail, yeah.
In fact, when people ask me, how do I explain the fact that I did his first 5 movies and he used pre-recorded music ever since then? And I use, as part of my answer, I considered Stanley a master chef. He brought all the ingredients, put them together in this huge pot called a work print, and he mixed the ingredients. But with music, you can't really tell the impact until you hear it with the orchestra. And on the scoring stage, it's too late, it's too expensive to go back, when there's usually no time to redo it.
Sure.
And he couldn't mix, he couldn't put that in the mix with just me describing the music or playing it on the piano. And I think that's why he went to pre-recorded music. He knew the ingredients, they could mix them well. And because he's Stanley Kubrick, he makes them kind of magnificently, and a lot of jokes like the Blue Danube and stuff like that. That was kind of brilliant. But I believed then and I believe now that his reason was because he needed to hear the ingredients before he made the soup or the cake.
Right. I get it. That's a perfect metaphor. I want to ask, because you have cited your ability to work quickly, expediently as being crucial to your career. Was that something innate in you, Gerald, or did it come with experience, or do you feel it was just done out of necessity?
Necessity, pretty much. I had 4 kids to feed and to send to college, and I needed the work. And in movies and in television, they give you a deadline of, there's either an air date for TV or a budget date, like the producer says, Jerry, we have to have this scored by January 15th because we're running out of money and we can't go into overtime, et cetera, And so you have to learn to get it done then. And so it's necessity that made me think and trust my feelings. At 4 a.m, you have to make a decision that could affect your career. And you had no choice. You had to do it.
Right.
You can't call up the producer and say, I'm sorry, I'm going to miss the deadline. That's for sure you're out of the business.
Right, of course.
So I developed a technique of forcing myself to come up with ideas, and then the next morning I would choose the best one and go with it. And I guess I got lucky. Most of them worked.
Well, was it luck or was it your own tenacity, or
I will take both words, luck, tenacity, and I hope some innate ability. Sometimes it's called talent, but I don't want to use the word because that's a little self-serving. But
I understand.
I hope that my judgment and taste saw me through. This I learned from Stan. Actually, I never really thought of this until right now. Stanley knew, he saw a lot of movies. He made sure he learned what he was talking about. He was certainly a magnificent professional photographer. He knew what the rules were of the commercial world and the artistic world, and he knew what his own taste was, and he combined them. And I think I learned from them how at a certain point you have to trust your own judgment.
Yes.
I never gave Stanley credit for that, but I'm doing that right now.
Wow.
I learned from him that at a certain point you can't go what the critics say, what the other composers have done. You have to go by your own taste and judgment. And I think I owe that to Stanley.
That's beautiful.
I'll begin. I never thought of that before.
Wow.
Well, hell, I'm just a kid. I'm just 90 and a half.
God bless. This is such a treat. I can't tell you how much we appreciate this. And I'm sure people listening are really going to enjoy everything you've been sharing with us. It's just nothing short of revelatory, Gerald. Thank you.
Oh, okay. My pleasure. I think I mentioned something about the baseball game that I gave him with my ball club. Mm-hmm. Did I tell you about that?
You guys played softball together, and he was in right field.
Yeah. But the point of the story is that he wanted so badly to be a regular person, which he was not. He was, too smart and all that stuff. And I associate that also. He visited me once. I just had a kid, and there I was, a composer, a conductor, and a professional oboe sax player. And there I was, a father with a child. And he actually literally called me a great man. And by that he meant anybody who combined the values of normal family, kid, and all that stuff, and keep a career. He actually used that phrase, and I associate that with his wish to play a baseball game. He wanted to be a regular guy, and a father, all that stuff. And I'm combining those two, at least for the purposes of this interview. His quest, his desire, his need to feel like a regular guy, a father, a baseball player, that kind of stuff. I hope nobody thinks that I'm putting him down. I actually think I'm putting him up.
No, of course not. No, I think that's very well put. It is very well put. And, the desire for someone exceptional to be just a regular person does seem to be in line with, a great deal of what we do know about Stanley, just as, lifelong fans and enthusiasts of his work, and also who he was as a person, as a man. There came a point when I felt I had read every book and article about how he made his films, and I became, I'm sure like a lot of other fans, more curious to know about who it was behind the camera, behind the script, and working on these, the man himself, the logical evolutionary next step in our curiosity to want to understand. So I think that's perfectly stated, that he, was an exceptional person, and he wanted to be a regular guy. We interviewed a young filmmaker named Marshall Allman, and one of the questions we ask people sometimes is very simply, and there's no correct answer. The question is, who is Stanley Kubrick? Mr. Allman said, and I'll never forget, he said he felt that when Stanley was young, he felt, that he was, a pretty regular person, but he had these things he wanted to accomplish. And at some point he likely might have said to himself, perhaps subconsciously, well, if I have to become a genius, then I'm going to become a genius. And I think that's a very interesting take. I don't know if it's accurate or not, but it certainly would.
I heard him say at one time, maybe when we were out having a beer or something, well, what do you want to do with your life? Somebody yelled at him, and he said, I want to make a string of masterpieces.
Wow.
I'd like to bring up 2 points. I think I read the book by someone named Carr, Paths of Glory, but I think Stanley added that ending of the German girl singing to the French soldiers.
Yes.
And I think Stanley added that, and I think that was part of his humanity, his regular person, his people are people, even though they were just shooting each other, trying to kill each other. Nevertheless, this song and their humanity tried to bring them together in that last song, which I think was one of the most brilliant things I ever saw in movies. That and the ending of The Killing, which was another part of Stanley, like his string of masterpieces, like it's going to be his way and it's going to be great. When the cops were coming in, cornering Sterling Hayden at the airport, and his girlfriend, Colleen Grace, run, they're coming after you. And he said, what's the difference?
Johnny, you've got to run.
What's the difference?
If it's not going to be my way as a man, successful, rich man, what's the difference?
Oh, yeah.
That's another part of Stanley. My God, what a pleasure this is. I get to tell these things I haven't thought about for 40 years.
Well, I mean, the pleasure is equal. I mean, we're just floored by your, unflappable memory and your openness and your candor, and I'm just grateful. I don't have any problem with this being considered an interview, but for my part, like, I'm just pleased if you feel like we're having a conversation.
Yeah. Is it being recorded? I hope it is, because I probably will forget what I've said in case you ask me to repeat.
Oh, for heaven's sake! Of course, yes.
Okay.
Yes. This is all on the record, my good man.
Okay.
Well, okay, so speaking of Paths of Glory, this was your ultimate collaboration, your final picture with Stanley, and the film came out in '57. And you mentioned the final scene and the German girl, of course, being Christiane Harlan, Christiane or Christiana. I'm not still 100% sure what the correct pronunciation is.
He calls her Christiana.
He did. Okay, I thought it was Christiana. At any rate, I was just going to say that on that last thought that was the first time I saw it, and every time since I get moved almost to the point of tears. It's just one of the most. If you've ever seen Charlie Chaplin's picture City Lights,
I adored that.
Yeah. Okay. That the ending of Paths of Glory is on par with the ending of City Lights, in that I cannot watch it and not have tears come to my eyes, because it's just, as you said, the touch of humanity that it shows is truly timeless.
Yeah, Chaplin, that sums up Chaplin. She feels her hand and knows that he was the one.
Yep, exactly.
Woo!
Yeah, shivers down my spine. I'm so glad you got the reference. Well, that ending of Paths of Glory is, I would put that up against, anybody's argument for best ending of a picture in cinema history, because it's just so beautiful and poignant, and the way that her singing silences that whole room of drunken soldiers.
Now, gentlemen, I give you our latest acquisition from the enemy. From Germany. Pearl, washed ashore by the tide of war. Sag den Herrschaften guten Tag. Guten Tag. In a civilized language. It's true, the little lady has her limitations. As a matter of fact, she has absolutely no talent at all. Except that is, well, maybe a little natural talent. She can't tell any jokes, and she can't balance rubber balls on her little nose. But she can sing like a bird. She has a throat of gold. Come on, honey, sing us a
Und als man ihm die Botschaft bracht, dass sein Herzliebchen im Sterben lag, da ließ er all sein Hab und Gut und eilte seinem Herzliebchen zu. Da ließ er all sein Hab und Gut und eilte seinem Herzliebchen zu. Ach bitte, Mutter, bring ein Licht, mein Liebchen stirbt, ich seh es nicht. Das war dem Mädchen ein ganzes Jahr. Das war für Mann ein treuer Husar, der liebt sein Mädchen ein ganzes Jahr. Es war ein Mann, ein treuer Husar, der liebt sein Mädchen ein ganzes Jahr, ein ganzes Jahr.
one of your questions, I think I remember, was that the mistakes that they made in singing that song. Anyway,
Well,
I'd love to hear about the mistakes, though. I'm
yeah,
curious.
please. Why don't you go ahead and tell us about that?
okay, the song that I asked, her name was George von Bloch. He was the production supervisor of Paths of Glory. He told me, I said, well, I had to conduct them, the soldiers singing that thing. And he said, well, the song, he says, everybody in Germany knows the Treue Hussar. It's like Yankee Doodle in the United States.
Right.
And they knew it so well that they sang it too well. So Stanley asked me to build in some mistakes. So we did. I had set aside some of these things, some of the soldiers, to come in wrong at various places, and I cued them, gave them a hand cue, to start singing in a wrong place. So we had to create the mistake in that song.
Oh, wow. That's a really, I think that might be an exclusive, fellas.
Yeah, it probably was Stanley's idea, who, as we have learned over the years, knew how to make a movie, and he needed the realism of a couple of imperfections in the singing, and we manufactured them.
Was that done in the studio with the choir, or was that done on the set in Germany with the actors?
No, it's done in Germany with the actors, or with extras. I don't know if they were the actual actors, but no, it's just done in Germany.
Mm-hmm.
But it was done like a studio setup, with the picture, so it would be synchronized and everything.
Fascinating.
Well, we did the score. We recorded a score in Germany, too. What am I talking about? But
yeah, she begins singing very slowly, and she's kind of like encouraged to pick it up. It's almost like she was being forced to sing. It was an odd scene. That's interesting to hear.
Mm.
Yeah. We had to cue them in. They didn't all want to sing because she was a French, she was the enemy. And that was the beauty of the whole thing. The French girl is singing to the German soldiers.
Mm-hmm.
What about it? No, excuse me, the other way around. The
right.
German girl singing to the soldiers. Yeah. Another good touch.
She sobers them up with a song.
And brings them together and sort of, that's why some people call it the best anti-war movie ever made.
Mm.
These people who have spent 4 years killing each other were now singing together.
Yeah. We had the privilege to interview David Morley, who played young Brian Patrick Lyndon to Ryan O'Neill's Brian Lyndon. And I remember him telling us that his favorite Kubrick film is Paths of Glory.
Wow, a lot of people's, yeah. It shows up on Turner Classics every few months. And
it is one of those ones that in the early days of home video in the 1980s was overlooked, while, Kubrick's other pictures like The Shining and Clockwork Orange in 2001 were getting a lot of reviewings on home video by people. And Paths of Glory had certainly not been on my radar until somebody brought it to my attention when I was still a young man. But it fortunately, like Barry Lyndon, it got its day in the sun, because now everyone points to it as another masterpiece in his string of masterpieces. Yeah. So, with your final collaboration with Stanley being Paths of Glory, it actually, coincided, of course, with when Stanley met his third wife, Christiana. And if I'm not mistaken, you met all three of his wives, and each of them had worked on some of his films up to that point. Right. So if there's anything personal that you would like to exclude, don't feel pressured to share it. But we're just curious what your recollections are of the three women that Stanley was married to, and what it was about Christiana that ultimately made him so happy.
I'm hesitating because it's gossip kind of thing. But yes, I was in the middle of the breakup between Stanley and Ruth. In fact, they wouldn't talk to each other, and they would leave a message for the other with me, and I would call them. And I don't want to talk about it, but it wasn't all beautiful.
Okay. Well, forgive me. We can certainly leave anything out that you don't like. I'm certainly not trying to pry into anything too personal. We're just curious.
Last week, maybe it was with you people, I gave an interview and I told the story of Sally and Ruth and the ballet tour and everything, and I'm sorry I did.
Okay. Well,
was it you? Not your last interview, but about a week and a half ago, I did that, and I regretted it. I forgot who I gave that interview to. Maybe some of the.
Was it the Guardian?
Perhaps it was the Guardian. The Guardian magazine in the UK, because we didn't speak to you a week and a half ago. It was this past Sunday we got the honor to speak with you for the first time.
Okay. Oh, I'm. It was an honor, eh? Boy, I wish I recorded that. And when I'm having a bad night, I'll play to say, "Hey, those people over in England said it was an honor."
It is an honor.
If I could it wouldn't. I don't think it would be gossipy. It's up to you to decide. But on the set of Paths of Glory, there was a point where he met Christian, who he ended up living the rest of his life with, on the set of Paths of Glory. And I remember an interview with James Harris, the producer, where Kubrick said to him, "Hey, that's a very interesting woman there," or some variation of that. And I was just wondering if there was a similar experience you had where before he got up the courage to ask her out, that he mentioned something to you about her.
Not really, no.
Well, I agree with James in that it's not gossipy to be appreciative of how those two came to fall in love, because I've seen even recent interviews with Christiana where she, poignantly and, mournfully describes the end of Stanley's life and says, with a great sense of reflection and peace in her heart that they had, I guess it was 42 wonderful years together, in her words.
Yeah. Well, Ruth Sapatka was a top professional, very bright, beautiful, coming from Viennese aristocracy, and maybe she was too independent as opposed to a more gentle, subservient German wife. That's just a guess, but it may be something along that line, that it was just easier for Stanley to be around Christiana.
They seem to have suited each other very well. Christiana very, jokingly pointed out that he would run into the room while she was painting with a piece of music he wanted her to hear, and she would say, "Go away, Stanley, I'm working." And they always understood that. They had a shorthand that was like a mutual respect of each other as artists.
Yeah. I knew her in Germany, but that was before they were officially connected.
Mm-hmm.
But we still had dinner just about every night in Germany, both with Christiana and with Stanley and myself, and occasionally George von Bloch, who himself was German aristocracy.
Mm-hmm.
I recently read something that said Stanley purchased an automobile on the set of Paths of Glory and liked it, and then he had it shipped back to the States. Do you remember anything about him buying a car there?
Yeah, that does ring a bell. Huh. I don't know details about that.
Why were you asked to go to Germany? Was that normal in those days for a composer to travel abroad to the film set?
Well, the picture was made there, and the budget was partly financed by the Bavaria Film Plots or something like that.
Okay.
Bayerische Film Plots. So I think the money was there, and there's certainly the good musicians were there too. And I was delighted to be flown over to one of these centers of the world of music.
Well, the music in Paths of Glory features so much percussion and brass. I'm going to assume or guess that was your idea, or was that a confab with you and Stanley coming up with that idea?
We both loved the idea. There was the military connection with percussion and the psychological connection. Like, percussion is devoid of tonality.
Right.
And somehow those soldiers out in no man's land by themselves must have been one of those ghastly, terrifying experiences of loneliness and abandonment possible. And Stanley and I both agree that a way to express that is to take out the tonality, just have raw, atonal drum music, which is the theory, the aesthetic behind our choice of that most of those scenes were shot just with percussion, except for occasional marches or the Troya Hussar or La Marseillaise, etc. But it was an aesthetic decision to try to reproduce the feeling of alone on that in no man's land by yourself with soldiers dying all around you.
Well, you've mentioned in previous interviews years ago that your score for Paths of Glory you considered exceedingly bleak, and to paraphrase, seemed to drain the humanity of the men, the characters we see on screen. So how did you feel about Stanley's ending, which obviously seems to give some humanity back to them? Do you recall how you first felt when you saw that ending?
I felt elated. I felt that having reproduced the horrors of war, he somehow got the Germans and the French together with that song. I thought it was brilliant. And I told him so.
Yeah. Do you remember any of the specific discussions over things that you had with Stanley? Namely, you had mentioned elsewhere that at some point it had gotten to a place where you almost had to rationalize every single note you'd composed to Stanley.
I just gave you an example, that cymbal crash.
Right.
Patrol was out in no man's land. Yeah, justified just about everything, including my orchestrations for La Marseillaise. How French should it be? Should it sound World War I, more stuff like that? I had to justify, which was useful. He forced me to make sure that my thinking and my musical taste was being governed by some kind of intelligence and historical perspective, which is one of the reasons he was Stanley Kubrick. He worried about things like that.
In light of historical perspective, we're curious to know if Kubrick ever spoke with you about his next project, which of course was Spartacus. Yes. Tell us about that.
We talked about it and said, "You interested?" or something like that. And he actually introduced me, or got me together. Well, we had dinner with Kirk Douglas one night and talked about Spartacus. And I kind of assumed that I might do it. And then about a month or so later, when I was already back in the States, I got a call from Kirk and said, "Jerry, I'm sorry, but we feel here that you're just not experienced enough to do Spartacus." So Kirk was the one who fired me. But yeah, we were actually talking about doing it. And that would have been fun.
Sure. But it was Kirk Douglas who said no.
I think it was, at that time, the most expensive film made. I guess he did.
Maybe the finance people, whoever financed was it MGM? I don't remember who. They say, "Hula, fuck is Gerald Fried? I'm sorry. We don't, you know.
Hey, at least he gave you a phone call, so you didn't hear any.
Yeah.
Nice.
Especially finding out by going to the movies and seeing, Alex North's name up there.
Mm.
Also, Alex North ain't a bad guy to lose a movie to.
True that. Well, that's very humble and gracious to say.
Can I give you an extraneous story about losing a movie? It has nothing to do with Kubrick, but I was, my agent got me to interview Otto Preminger about Anatomy of a Murder. I did something, I usually like to, or I don't like to, but I find myself arguing at these meetings, not about the music, but in addition to that, about the story itself. And I told Otto Preminger that, the stories, the characters are too complex. Here I am, this kid still in his 20s, arguing with Otto Preminger about the script he wrote. And he says, young man, this is not commedia dell'arte. People are complicated. Anyway, the joke reversed itself because he liked the fact that I did that, and he actually offered me the movie. My agent actually filed a booking notice that I was going to do Anatomy of a Murder. It turned out that the original composer they wanted, who first said no, said yes, and they called me and said, Jerry, I'm sorry, but the original composer we wanted said yes. And the point of the story is that I told you losing a score to Alex North. The person I lost this score to was Duke Ellington.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So that's the point of the story. It's all right to lose a score to Duke Ellington.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Okay.
Wow.
The end of my stories. I got no more anecdotes for you.
You can have a couple more anecdotes if you want. Don't worry about it.
Share everything you got, please.
Well,
I'd love to hear about Gilligan's Island. I grew up watching that show.
Gilligan's Island? I do have a funny story about that. I was interviewed to do a story called The Wild and the Free. It's a comedy about chimps. And one of the producers and writers was Douglas Shorts. And the producers read my credits, found out that I wrote music for Stanley Kubrick, and says, this is a comedy. We don't want Gerald Fried. He doesn't know how to write comedy. So I told them to ask Doug Shorts, who happened to be Sherwood Schwartz's nephew, who was the producer and writer of
there you go. Yep.
Yeah, for whom I did the score for 3 years. So that's another story of getting a job. The credentials for Gilligan's Island got me the job with The Wild and the Free about comedies. Otherwise, I wouldn't believe my comedy credentials. Yeah, I'm telling these anecdotes I haven't told in 30 years. All right.
What else you got? Well, so you did write for some really memorable TV shows like Man from U.N.C.L.E., It's About Time, of course, Gilligan's Island, which I grew up on reruns, but I must have seen every Gilligan's Island episode several times. But you won your first Emmy finally for Roots, which was a landmark television event at the time. How did your writing process for Roots play out?
Once again, it wasn't much of a process. I had done a lot of work for Stan Margulies and David Wolper, and they, of course, were the producers of Roots. But they hired Quincy Jones as the obvious person, to do the score for Roots. I would have hired him had I been the producer. And then a few weeks before the first date, the TV showing of Roots, I get a call from Stan Margulies that said, Jerry, we're going to give you $1,000 to keep your pencil sharp and your mouth shut. Oh, I said, does this have something to Roots? And Stanley said, what did I just say? That's keeping my mouth shut. So, the Quincy, for various reasons, did not come up with a theme, and they needed it because the show was opening in 3 weeks. They had to advertise it. So I came in, wrote the main theme, finished episode number 1, and did everything else in Roots.
Wow.
Quincy had some writer's block problems, which Now, I'm not telling tales out of school. Everybody knows about it. Vinci himself talked about that.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm just curious as an aside, with all of the work you got in the years after working with Kubrick, do you recall if there were any lingering influences of your time composing for Kubrick's films that later came to bear on work you did for all these other projects?
Yeah, what I mentioned about 20 minutes ago, Kubrick's combination of respecting the traditions of the field and the other writers, directors, and playing off against your own taste. I learned that from him, that balance, and it stood me in good stead. At what point do you say, I'm sorry, this is the way it's always done, but maybe it's always done better. I got to do it what I think. And where to draw the line, I learned from Stanley, and I am eternally grateful.
I want to bring James in for a question specifically about the Bronx Council of the Arts, which James has been involved with. Are you there, man?
Yeah, I'm there. And well, we were just wondering if perhaps you might have interest in us helping you get inducted. I'm sure you're familiar with the Hollywood Walk of Fame, the stars on the sidewalk. Well, they kind of have a version of that in the Bronx, down near Yankee Stadium and the courthouse, where they have, it's not stars in the cement, but they have plaques up, and they every year, going back to about, I think it was like 1996 when it began, and they induct about 6 or 7 people every year who grew up in the Bronx. And we have a connection, sort of, to some extent. And if you were interested in getting inducted in there, we can get the ball rolling for you. Read off the list of people who are in. Do you have that?
Well, I mean, you've got the likes of Regis Philbin, Burt Young, Rita Moreno, Gary Marshall, Colin Powell, of course, Stanley Kubrick, Johnny Pacheco, who was a famous Latin music composer, he was inducted the same year as Stanley, and more recently, the likes of Ace Frehley, the guitar player from the group Kiss, and more significantly, perhaps, to Kubrick's universe, the famous astrophysicist Neil deGrasse Tyson was inducted. They're all Bronx boys like you.
Hey, 20 years on Kingsbridge Road.
I'll send
all they can do is say no. Never heard of him.
All right, we'll do. I'll get in touch with them and tell them you're in Connecticut now. That's where you are, right? You're in Connecticut, right?
Yeah.
I say we should go for it.
I'll clean my toes before I leave my footprints in the cement.
You know the name Johnny Pacheco? Because you were speaking earlier about working with some Latin musicians. Do you know him?
I know the name. I don't know him.
Okay.
I worked with a band called Pupi Campo. Do you know one of the Latin people who was big in the 50s and 40s and 50s?
I heard of that.
Real name, Pupi.
Probably with an I on the end, not the letter Y, I'm guessing.
Yes, of course.
That would have been a little too in your face.
Yeah, you both know New York, don't you?
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember looking across the Hudson River into Jersey and saw the sign Bill Miller's Riviera, the nightclub right near the George Washington Bridge? That's where I played with Pupi Campo.
Was that in Fort Lee?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There you go.
There used to be, that was Hollywood before Hollywood. There was a film industry there, and the term cliffhanger comes from those steep rocks on the west side of the George Washington Bridge.
The Palisades. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I didn't either. Wow.
Yeah. I happened to I acquired a severe case of poison ivy from climbing those Palisades. So I remember them.
Well, I mean, the Bronx Council for the Arts also has inducted some, well-known musicians from the Bronx. Jazz flautist Dave Valentine.
Oh yeah.
He was inducted in 2000.
And maybe Stan Getz was from the Bronx. I know he's from New York, but I don't know if it was the Bronx. Oh, I can tell you another graduate of DeWitt Clinton High School who to me is a major figure in music. His name is Dean Dixon, and he was the first African-American conductor of a symphony orchestra. And I played with him in my young days with the American Youth Orchestra.
We move forward now. Next on our program come musical terms. Musical terms is the stuff that lets you talk about music and discuss music with the words that belong to that form. So, to our first musical term, legato. I think one might say that legato is the smooth flowing or connected flowing of music from tone to tone. Our next musical term is staccato, and that would be the short playing or disconnected playing of music. Our next term is spiccato, meaning an even shorter playing of the notes, mainly available only on the strings, and meaning primarily a bouncing or throwing of the bow across the strings. The next musical term is pizzicato, meaning the picking or plucking of the strings on the instruments, and that naturally means it's absolutely limited to the strings. Our next musical term is scale. And that is like the step ladder of music, going step after step, either up or down. There are many kinds of scales, just as there are many kinds of stairs or ladders. We will use only the major scale and for only one octave. Here, the descending, ascending, and then descending major scale.
And when you might suggest their name, Dean Dixon, he went to Clinton like in the early 40s, and he's historically important, an African-American symphony conductor. He wound up, I think, conducting the Oslo Symphony, something in Scandinavia. He couldn't get a job in this country for obvious reasons.
I think he was, Stephen is telling me, I think he was born in Harlem.
Yep.
Dean Dixon, yeah, just uptown. Yep. Well, the Bronx also inducted Ray Barretto in 2002. The famous 50s singing groups, the Chantels in 2002 and the Chiffons in 2005. And the legendary Bobby Darin was from the Bronx. He was inducted in 2004.
All right. Okay.
So you'd be in, some pretty decent company and holding your own, to say the least.
One distinction about the Bronx Walk of Fame and the Hollywood Walk of Fame is, they have to pay to be in the people who get their star in the sidewalk. They have to pay like $100,000 for that.
Yep.
The Bronx is free.
The Bronx is free, exactly right.
I was going to say my final offer is $99,000.
No, the Bronx isn't running a racket like Hollywood is, shaking you down for a gold star that people trample on.
Yeah, there will be a lot of people who would be very pleased to know that Dean Dixon name came up once again after, half a century.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought that up. It's very important.
Yeah, I know he went to Clinton, so he may have lived in the Bronx for at least 3 or 4 years. Or maybe he traveled from Harlem, I don't know.
He conducted, if I'm not mistaken, the Mexican National Symphony Orchestra during the 1968 Olympic Games.
Dean Dixon?
Yeah.
Oh, maybe. Oh, that's cool. Okay.
Isn't it?
I knew him from the American Youth Orchestra.
Right. Even beforehand.
Yeah.
Well, one of the questions we have from Mark Lentz, who does such great research for us, he's curious about the score you wrote for To the Moon and Beyond, which aired at the 1964 World's Fair, which Stanley watched while he was preparing to make 2001.
I think he hired somebody, one of the technical people from that movie, to work on 2001.
Well, Alex North was, of course, famously commissioned to write and record the score, but ultimately it was not used.
Right.
Was there any thought given at any time to you composing the score for 2001?
I hope so, but I can't prove it. But nobody ever asked me.
I see, yeah. Well, we had to ask.
Yeah.
Did you know Alex North around that time, or were you aware that he was working on the score for 2001?
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, the news got around the industry at that time. Yeah, we knew each other. We weren't friends, but we knew each other. He was more of a superstar than I was.
That's very humbly put.
Of great, so-called the genius composers from New York that were brought to Hollywood. I think the first one was Bernard Herrmann, and then was Alex North, and then was Elmer Bernstein, and then 5 years after Elmer was I, the new young composer who was going to save Hollywood movies. And it's a great reputation to have. I got a lot of work because of it. But I think there was some mythology about these composers from New York that were special or something. And those composers I named before me certainly were pretty damn special. And I think I profited from being from New York. I wasn't going to mention Kingsbridge Road until you brought up the subject of getting my feet in the cement up there.
Well, I think it's certainly something to be proud of. Not that we have a choice in our place of birth or where our parents raised us, but it is true that in large parts of the U.S. and perhaps elsewhere, that if you come from New York or the tri-state area, that your reputation can precede you as someone who gets the job done. One of the alumni from my college where I graduated, Emerson, is Jay Leno. And when he went out to LA to take over the Tonight Show, I heard through some friends who had graduated that went on to work on the Tonight Show that Leno and other people in Hollywood were very partial to hire people from New York because they had a reputation that preceded them, that like they're going to work 18, 20-hour days. They're going to get the job done. They're not going to complain.
Oh, in addition to the qualities you just mentioned about New Yorkers, we also have the ability to survive getting mugged in a dark alley.
In 76, you were nominated for an Oscar for Best Original Score for the film Birds Do It, Bees Do It.
Right.
And in that year, there were, if I'm not mistaken, in your category, there were several other great composers with memorable scores. You had The Wind and the Lion from Jerry Goldsmith, Jack Nietzsche's One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, Alex North is... Go on.
John Williams' Jaws.
Yep.
Oh, ask me my Oscar story about sitting in the audience that night.
Tell us about your recollections of being at the Oscars that night.
There was no chance of me winning up against those really good and major scores to major movies. So I sat there kind of quietly, enjoying the fact of being there. They gave me an aisle seat. And then my fantasy took over. About a half hour before the announcement, I started to figure, well, of course, they gave me an aisle seat because they knew that all those big fancy pictures were going to cancel the votes out, and I was going to win. So for a half hour, I was absolutely 2 feet off the ground because I knew I was going to win because Jaws and the rest of them were going to cancel each other out. Well, I was wrong. But I did have a half hour of glory. It was in fantasy, but who's counting?
That's so cool. I suspect if you're going to lose to, anyone losing to Jaws and John Williams' score, it probably didn't soften the blow, but maybe in time.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a good score he wrote. He always does a good job.
Well, I mean, again, there were, some considerable competitors that year. Nietzsche's One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Alex North had a score for Bite the Bullet. Some fantastic company to be in.
Yeah, that's why I thought they would cancel each other out and I would win.
Yeah. And
hey, I don't ask you about your fantasies. But I did ask you about this one, so there.
Fair play, sir. Fair play. That's hilarious.
Speaking of fantasies, in every one of the screenplays I'm writing and stage plays, one of which won a competition in New York just this past year, they all have fantasy characters. In one of them, this violinist has a fantasy that the ghosts of Bach came back and directed his life. And another one, this guy at a jazz concert, a remake of a famous 1938 jazz concert, where he did something backstage. He got wild. He started a fire and he scarred the face of his girlfriend. And 25 years later, the remake, no matter how hard they try to prevent it, there's a ghost that comes back and forces him to do the same thing all over again. So I'm into fantasy ghosts. Anyway, this has nothing to do with Kubrick, but except I bet he would have loved these stories. He might have even tried to do one of them, but we don't know.
Were you ever a member of the Academy?
I was in there since 1977 when I first came to Los Angeles. My agent got me in, yeah.
And you remain in the Academy? Wow.
Still am. I still get 200 movies. They've started coming in for this season.
And you get to vote on them.
Right.
That's extremely cool.
Bribe me up for any movie, I'm open for bribes.
You've got them like in a trench coat. You're like standing on a street corner there in Connecticut, like with your trench coat open. Hey man, want some movies?
Exactly.
Want some movies? You got DVDs on one side of the trench coat and a bunch of used watches on the other side.
I also use my trench coat to flash people on the street.
I saw that coming. Oh my gosh. Well, we would be loath to omit asking you about Star Trek because although it's not Kubrick related, it's all within Kubrick's universe, so to speak. So what are your recollections? Share with us what you have about working on Star Trek, Gerald.
Once again, a little bit like working on One Potato, Two Potato, and working on Roots. It was almost like a mission. The Star Trek stories they were set in outer space, but they were serious reflections on a lot of the important emotional currents of us people here on Earth. And I felt that, and the people, Bob Justin and Gene Roddenberry, sort of felt that too, and I felt kind of honored working on it. but it was special. And of course, they let me do imaginative things, so it was nice. Also, Lenny Nimoy and I were sort of friends.
Oh, that's interesting.
He was from New York, as you know.
Yeah. In that time that you worked with Star Trek, it sounds like you took away something rather personal from it, the way you reflect upon the stories touching on the human current in all of us on Earth, as you said. I think it's
for
cool.
example, do you remember the Star Trek episodes called Shore Leave? Yeah. Yeah, they had this magician on some planet had the power to read your interpersonal thoughts.
Of course.
Your dreams. So that sort of sounds like one of my fantasy stories.
Captain's log, stardate 3025.8. A planet which seems to be paradise is chosen for a shore leave, but things of fantasy, which are undeniably real, suddenly appear.
Sulu!
Enjoy yourself, Captain. It's an interesting planet. I believe you'll find it quite pleasant. You'll have no problems.
I swear I heard someone moving around.
Don't talk like that.
Well, I am on shore leave.
And so am I.
All right, Jimmy boy.
I'd be happy if I could just have those X-ray glasses that, let me see through ladies' clothing.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
I'm sorry, that's a terrible joke. That joke is not going to fly in this
on the same level as my trench coat joke.
Well, going back in time again to, over 40 years ago at the 76 Oscars, which we've discussed, Leonard Rosenman won an Oscar for music adaptation, the category of best music adaptation for Barry Lyndon. Did you know Leonard Rosenman at the time? Yeah. He was another one of these New York genius composers who's going to save Hollywood. Yeah, we were friends, actually. What comparisons do you think you could draw between your work with Stanley and some of the other directors you worked with later on, such as, say, a Robert Aldrich? Aldrich, to me, was kind of a good Hollywood-type producer. And the only one I could think of was Larry Pierce, the director of One Potato, Two Potato, who was kind of a New York type and sort of a Kubrick type, bright and sensitive and innovative. And Paul Mazursky was another one. Well, Paul Mazursky was, he worked for Kubrick as an actor and also hung around with the Greenwich Village crowd that I earlier described. So those two I put in categories with Stanley, and who else? Those are the only two that come to mind.
You worked with Corman, right? Roger Corman?
Yeah. No, he wasn't really in that category.
Oh, no.
No.
But he was a character then.
Oh, yeah.
But I do have an interesting story about him. He had one of his things that he did was he could get new young talent together. So this director with this actor, and he sized me up and lined me up with some director I never heard of. And I was busy at the time. I says, Roger, thank you, but I don't know this guy. I'll pass on this movie. The punchline was that this director, producer, was Francis Coppola. So that was one of the 2 or 3 mistakes I made in my career, turning down an invitation to do a picture with Francis Coppola.
Interesting. What year would that have been? And what film?
The picture I did for Roger was, I think, Cry Baby Killer, the one that was...
Yeah, no, I'm sorry. I meant which one were you contacted to work with Coppola on?
I don't know. I never even got into that.
Okay.
I just said no.
And Eaton's Rainbow, maybe, something, I think, was an early one he did.
The Rain People.
Don't remember.
Rain.
Anyway, I still had a pretty good career, but, you know, to miss up an opportunity like that was kind of, it wasn't short-sighted because I didn't know who he was at the time.
Sure. Well, we know from the letters that you had mentioned earlier that you continued to correspond with Stanley for years. Did you ever talk with him in regard to scoring in general, or scoring any of his later films?
Well, we did about Spartacus, and yeah, Heavy Metal Jacket, I think. We talked about that.
Oh, for Full Metal Jacket.
Full Metal Jacket, yeah.
Interesting. What are your recollections of that?
Well, his daughter, or rather his stepdaughter, wrote the electronic music for that, as I remember. And then the rest he used pre-recorded music.
That was Vivian, who was his youngest.
Yeah, Vivian.
And she is his biological daughter. She lives in the States nowadays.
Yeah.
And she used the moniker Abigail Mead.
Oh yeah, yeah.
As composer on that. That's actually seen a recent re-release on vinyl LP, the Full Metal Jacket soundtrack, and one side are the songs like Chapel of Love, and the other side are Vivian's experimental pieces. Well, Stephen, I want to bring you in because Stephen's been listening to a 1999 album called Dr. Strangelove, and there's a new box set. Stephen, you have a question about that, I believe.
Yeah, I got a CD album quite a few years ago, and it was called Dr. Strangelove, music from the films of Stanley Kubrick.
Right.
And I believe you obviously composed some of the music on that. The album was, it took about 2 years to make, I believe, and was actually ready for release, coincidentally, the same month as Stanley's untimely death. I think that's when the album came out, which would have been around March 99. Can you tell us about the creation of that album and how you got involved with it?
I got involved with it, I'm sorry to say, by reading about it in Variety and going out and buying the album. I had nothing to do with the compilation of that. I don't even know if it was Stanley who chose those things, but I had excerpts from all 5 of the movies I did, as I recall, on that. And I was very pleased to be on it.
Yeah, well, it's got some notes in there from you, as though you kind of were the main man on there. It's kind of got a little small interview with you on the sleeve notes, so that's obviously not correct.
Well, maybe I'm not remembering properly. Let me see if I could find that album. Look at those. Is it on the album?
Well, I've got it on CD. I'm not sure if it came out on vinyl. But it was a CD, and it was called Dr. Strangelove, music from the films of Stanley Kubrick, and it had music from all the films, but it had kind of right in the middle of the album, it had all the pieces that you did for Stanley.
Yeah, I know what I'm looking for. It on my shelf, which is a mess, and the labels fell off. Oh, I can't seem to find it. Anyway, they may have interviewed me on that, and I don't remember. But I don't remember being involved in putting it together. Found the album. I have it. It's called 2001, the music from Stanley Kubrick. The Killing, Killer's Kiss, Fear and Desire, Two Customer, Path of Glory, and Day of the Fight. Yeah.
Yeah, that's probably the same album. It must have been renamed at some point.
I'm looking for program notes here. Let me open this up.
Gerald, it seems to say that you kind of did some re-recording sessions in Prague in 1998. It says in the notes that you re-recorded your tracks in Prague in 1998, just before this album came out, with Paul Bateman and the City of Prague Philharmonic.
Oh yes, I was there. I actually went to Prague for that. I forgot. I don't know which is the original and which is for the... Oh, I finally got it out. Another program notes. A note from Gerald Fried, oh, for God's sake. Yes, I did go to Prague for that recording.
This is a very general question, and you've touched upon it in many ways, but Mark posed it. It's very simple and to the point. What did you and Stanley have in common?
Oh, I think we were both first-generation Americans from Eastern European Jewish parents. We both were interested sort of in the arts. We had the same age. We were the same age group. In fact, we were practically identical. Stanley, Alexander Singer, and myself were all born within 3 months of each other in 1928. And interested in the arts and music and film. And Stanley and I were, of all those people, we were married early. Stanley didn't have children, and he didn't seem to be interested at that time. No, I think just general, same age group, same background, same professional and cultural interests. That about does it. And sports, yes, we played tennis quite a bit, and that one baseball game.
So, okay, the last time that we spoke with you, Gerald, you've also mentioned that in more recent years you've become somewhat of a composer of stories, not just music, and you've written plays and movie screenplays on the subjects of mystical occurrences and fantasies, as you mentioned, and one of them is set in the jazz world, one of them is set in the classical world. You want to share with our listeners a bit about those?
The one in the classical world is called the Bach Double, and it's the story of this Puerto Rican street musician who works for pennies and coins on the steps of the Metropolitan Museum in New York. Do you know the one on 5th Avenue and 82nd Street?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Well, he's on the steps there working for, pennies, just, being a street musician. And the 16-year-old girl who lives in the penthouse across 5th Avenue happens to be the daughter of the world's greatest violinist. I happen to know Jascha Heifetz, and I sort of tailored this character on Jascha Heifetz, who was kind of a tough guy. And anyway, they fall in love with each other, the 16-year-old girl and this 18-year-old Puerto Rican street musician. The father finds out, sees them flirting, and goes crazy. The daughter of lust, the world's greatest violinist, doesn't hang out with a Puerto Rican street musician. Anyway, this street musician figures out from overhearing conversation that her father is so jealous and so insanely in love with his daughter that we can't admit it, that he is planning for her, after her debut recital, he is going to have a ritual, a suicide murder ritual. This he at the Wartburg Castle in Eisenach, Germany, which is Bach's birthplace, that they're going to play a concert there. They're going to play the Bach Double with Herbert von Karajan, the Berlin Philharmonic, after which he's going to take her up to the roof, and he's going to join Bach in playing a trio recital. Bach is, of course, in his fantasy, but that means this Puerto Rican street kid overhearing conversations figured out what he means. He hears things like top of the highest point of the Wartburg Castle, playing trios with Bach, who died was born 300 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
He figures out that this is a suicide murder ritual. He's going to take the 16-year-old girl he loves off the roof with him. Rather than lose her, he's going to kill himself and her. And Bach is the person, his fantasy Bach, is the one who set this up. So this 18-year-old Puerto Rican street kid has to get to Germany and stop this. So that's what this movie about. The other one is about, did I mention the remake of a 1938 famous jazz concert 25 years later, and a backstage accident happened, and no matter how hard they try to prevent it, it starts to happen again, and they can't seem to stop it. So those are the two screenplays I'm working on now.
Oh, I'd be fascinated to see those. I think everyone would. They sound really cool.
From your mouth to Louis B. Mayer's ear.
Is this a new endeavor, or have you done screenplays before?
I wrote plays before. Like I said, one of which was actually done and will be done in New York in a year. But I've had a lot of plays done both in Los Angeles and in Santa Fe. And in New York, as a matter of fact. I had a couple of things done at the Signature Theater, right in New York on 42nd Street. And I decided I really want to write movies. So I'm in the delicious position of being a neophyte writer at the age of 90 and a half. Yeah, it's
the 90-year-old neophyte. That sounds like a stage play in itself.
Right. Anyway, if they ever get done, or for ever this production of them, I'll invite you to see them. Either one of those might make interesting movies. The stage play that I had done, that they asked me to do in New York. Do you know the Hudson Guild Theater on 26th Street?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's supposed to be going in there. It's about the story of this young college student who's sort of in love with the professor, who's an evolutionary professor, and she believes, once again, fantasy, she believes that she's the divine spark. She's in charge of the moment when human beings are conceived. So she controls the sperm race and the lady eggs dance and how the sperm fight to get to lady egg. And when the winning sperm get there, she consecrates them with the divine spark, because that's her job. So that's another one of my fantasies.
How cool is that? Wow.
Oh, I get it.
Are you kidding me? I love it. I'd pay to see that hand over fist.
All right, if you run into any producers who might be interested, I'd be delighted to show them the scripts.
I'm calling Louis B. Mayer right now.
Oh, you're into fantasy too, okay.
Yes, I've got him on my existential phone. It's a new device. Steve Jobs just handed it down from beyond the infinite.
I bet Stanley would have been interested in one of those scripts.
You know what? I in all seriousness, Gerald, you should consider sending the script to Stephen, because Stephen is a credited film producer in the UK. It's just an idea, but it would be in safe hands, and I'm sure he would love to see it. You can trust us with it.
Okay. Steve, is he still on the line?
Yes, I'm here, Gerald.
Oh, would you like to look at one of these screenplays?
Absolutely. Yeah, because you've got my email, haven't you? Because we've been emailing each other. Yeah, I'd love you to send one through, or both of them, and I'd love to read them.
Okay, give me a few days to get organized, and I will send it to you. Oh, how nice.
Fantastic.
Wow. So cool. I just want, nothing more, nothing less than, front row tickets at the premiere for all of us, and backstage passes, and a big tray of those little sandwiches.
Absolutely.
Gerald, we're going to let you go, but I have to ask a couple final questions, which are very personal ones. I don't get to ask often enough, but for folks who actually knew Stanley, I have two special questions I love to ask when I get the chance. The first is, can you tell us about a time that Stanley made you laugh really hard? Or vice versa?
There were times. I remember we did a lot of laughs together. I remember when we were working in Germany, there were some real Prussian types that were so Prussian they were comical, and I know we made jokes about them. Let me think about it. If I think of laughs, I'm writing it down, laughs between Stanley and me, and I'll get back to you.
My other question is, if you can recall, one singular piece of really good advice that Stanley gave you, or better phrased, what is the best advice that Stanley ever gave you?
I think what I intimated before, to make sure that when you figure out how to proceed professionally, make sure you factor in your own taste with the industry norms and your contemporary contributions. And you make it your own. That stands out.
That's brilliant. It's beautiful. Well, the last question we have has no correct answer. And very simply put, my friend, who is Stanley Kubrick?
That's a fair question, actually. I think he is someone with unusual gifts, and he knew it. Stanley Kubrick said he is somebody with remarkable intuition or internal, emotional, and intellectual mechanisms. He could see and feel into people's brains. That's the answer. My best answer to your question: who is Stanley Kubrick?
That's a beautiful answer.
Introspection beyond the norm.
Introspection beyond the norm. I love it.
Yeah, and in addition to that, he was kind of a nice guy. We were friends.
Yeah, a regular guy, as you said.
Which is another thing. Stanley got things done.
Oh, man. I don't know what to say. It's just been a real treat, a real honor. And just bottom line, it's just been really cool. Because I think you're a genius, sir, but I also have gotten the chance to chat with you as a regular guy. And that
Thank you.
And I'm going to be chasing up those scripts as well next week, your 2 scripts.
Oh, yeah, thank you. What a hoot.
Yeah.
That's great.
Okay, a pleasure, and let's stay in touch.
That's great. Thank you, Gerald. It's been fantastic. Really appreciate this. And it's really going to help towards Stanley's legacy, which is what we're trying to keep alive and let people know about. So thank you for that.
That's a good goal. Okay, talk to you whenever.
Okay,
thanks, Gerald.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, Gerald. Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
Take care. See you soon.
Until next time, this is your host and humble narrator, Jason Furlong, saying thanks so much for listening, everybody. And to Gerald Fried, thank you for so many indelible contributions to the world's most truly universal language, music. As Stanley himself once said, quote, "A film should be more like music than fiction. It should be a progression of moods and feelings. The theme, what's behind the emotion, the meaning, all that comes later." End quote. So, see you later, Jerry. Godspeed.
It's Kubrick's universe. We just live in it.
We have taken very thorough precautions in this podcast against broadcasting anything which might only be attributed to human error.
These guys aren't scientists. They're making it up as they go along.
Thank you for listening to the Stanley Kubrick podcast. Come back soon.
It was real nice talking to you. Bye. Over and out.
This show comes to you from the Stanley Kubrick Appreciation Society.